1 month after my wife Corinne died, I hired a contractor to renovate her old office downtown. I was standing at her grave trying to say a final goodbye when my phone rang. It was the contractor Javier. He is a good man, a man who works with his hands, the kind of man my wife respected more than the bankers in expensive suits. But his voice was shaking. He said, "Walter, I need you to come down here. I just broke through the back wall behind the bookshelf. You need to see this." I told him I would be right there. Then he said something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He said, "Sir, do not come alone. Bring your sons. Bring Terrence and Kendrick." I didn't know then that Javier wasn't inviting them to see a hidden treasure. He was inviting them to their own execution. When we arrived and I saw what was hidden in that secret room, my heart didn't just break. It stopped cold. Before I tell you what we found behind that wall, let me know in the comments what city you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that the truth always finds a way to the surface no matter how deep you bury it. My name is Walter Jefferson. I am 68 years old, and for 40 years I was married to the strongest woman I have ever known. Corinne started her real estate company with nothing but a dream and a refusal to let anyone tell her where a black woman belonged in this city. We built a life. We built a legacy. But as I stood there in the cemetery that Tuesday morning staring at the fresh dirt over her casket, I realized we had failed at the most important thing. We had failed to raise men. The wind was cutting through my coat, biting at my skin, but it was not as cold as the scene playing out behind me. I was trying to read a poem Corinne loved, a simple verse about rest and peace. My hands were trembling not from the chill, but from grief. Behind me I heard a sigh. It was loud, theatrical, and impatient. I turned my head slightly. My oldest son Terrence was checking his Rolex. He was 42 years old, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and he looked like he was waiting for a bus, not mourning his mother. Next to him was his wife Meredith. She is a woman who smiles with her mouth but never with her eyes. She had her phone pressed to her ear, hiding it under the brim of her black hat, but she wasn't whispering quietly enough. I heard her say, "Yes, the lake house. We want to list it by Friday. No, the old man won't be a problem. He is too emotional to notice the paperwork." The words hit me harder than a physical blow. The old man. That is what I had become to them. Not a father, not a grieving husband, just an obstacle between them and the assets. I stopped reading the poem. I looked at my second son, Kendrick. He was 36, standing a few feet away, scrolling through text messages. He chuckled at something on his screen, then quickly covered his mouth, looking around to see if anyone had noticed. They were vultures, beautifully dressed, cologne-wearing vultures circling the body before it was even fully cold. I closed my Bible. I didn't finish the poem. Corinne deserved better than to have her memory dishonored by their impatience. I walked over to them. Meredith snapped her phone shut, flashing that practiced porcelain smile. She reached out to touch my arm, her fingers cold and sharp. "Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You kept it together so well. We were just thinking maybe we should skip the reception. Terrence has a tea time at the country club at 1, and Kendrick says he has a migraine. We can just drop you at home." Drop me at home. Like a package. Like a burden they needed to store away. I was about to speak to tell them exactly what I thought of their tea times and migraines when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Javier. I answered, grateful for the interruption. "Mr. Jefferson," Javier said. His breath was coming fast, like he had been running. "I am at the office. The demo team. We found something." I felt a strange tightness in my chest. "What is it, Javier?" "Is it the structural beams?" "No, sir. It is not structural." We took down the built-in bookcases in Mrs. Jefferson's private study. There is a space behind it, a room, and sir, you need to see what is on the desk. "I will come right now," I said. "Wait," Javier interrupted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't come alone. Bring your sons. Bring Terrence and Kendrick." "Why?" I asked, confused. "Just bring them, sir. They need to be there. Trust me." The line went dead. I stood there, holding the phone, looking at the 3 people who were supposed to be my family. They were already walking toward the parking lot, their backs to me. "Terrence Kendrick," I called out. My voice was not loud, but it was the voice I used when they were teenagers and had broken a window. It was a voice that demanded attention. They stopped and turned around. "We are going to your mother's office. Now!" Terrence groaned, throwing his head back. "Dad, come on. I told you I have a game. It is with the vice president of the bank. It is important for networking." Meredith stepped forward, her heels clicking on the pavement. Walter, really? You are upset. You shouldn't be going to that dusty old building. It is not safe for someone of your age with your blood pressure. Let us take you home to rest. Whatever the contractor wants, he is probably just trying to squeeze more money out of you for repairs that don't exist. You know how those people are. I knew exactly who she meant by those people. I looked her dead in the eye. Javier has never stolen a dime from me, Meredith, which is more than I can say for some people standing in this parking lot. Her smile faltered for a second, then returned tighter than before. I don't know what you are implying, Walter. I am not implying anything, I am telling you. Javier found something behind the walls. He wants us all there. Kendrick laughed nervously. Found what gold bars Mom didn't trust banks, but she wasn't a pirate dad. I don't know what it is, I said, gripping my cane until my knuckles turned white. But we are going. We can't, Terrence said, turning toward his Mercedes. I am not missing my game for a false alarm. Fine, I said. My voice was calm, deadly calm. Go play golf. But if you do, don't bother asking for that bridge loan you mentioned last week for your investment firm. And Kendrick, you can forget about me covering your credit card debt this month. The silence that followed was instant. Money. It was the only language they spoke fluently. It was the only leash I had left. Terrence looked at Meredith. She gave a barely perceptible nod, her eyes narrowing. She knew the game. She knew they needed to humor the old man to keep the cash flow open. Fine, Meredith, said her voice sugary sweet again. If it means that much to you, Dad, we will drive you, but we can't stay long. The drive to the downtown district was suffocating. I sat in the back seat of Terrence's luxury SUV. The leather smelled like new money and arrogance. Meredith sat in the passenger seat, texting furiously. I watched the city pass by the window. This was the city Corinne and I had helped build. We had renovated abandoned blocks, created affordable housing, given jobs to people who had prison records and couldn't get hired anywhere else. My sons didn't care about that. They only cared about the bottom line. They saw the buildings as numbers on a spreadsheet, not homes for families. We arrived at the old brick building on 4th Street. It was a historic structure one Corinne had loved. She kept her private office there for 30 years, away from the corporate headquarters. It was her sanctuary. Now the windows were covered in paper and a dumpster was parked out front filled with debris. Javier was waiting for us at the front door. He was covered in white drywall dust, his safety goggles pushed up on his forehead. He looked at me with deep sorrow in his eyes, then he looked at Terrence and Kendrick. His expression hardened. He didn't offer to shake their hands. Right this way, he said. We followed him through the lobby. Plastic tarps were hanging everywhere, creating a maze of translucent walls. The air smelled of sawdust and old secrets. Meredith held a handkerchief to her nose, looking at the dust on the floor with disgust. This is ridiculous, she muttered, ruining my Italian shoes for this. We reached the back office. This was where Corinne used to sit for hours, reading contracts, planning our future. The room was stripped bare, the carpet was ripped up, and the massive oak bookshelf that had covered the entire north wall was gone. In its place was a gaping hole. Javier stopped. He pointed to the hole. I noticed the measurements didn't add up, Javier said quietly. The building blueprints showed 5 extra feet of depth on this floor. I thought it was just a dead space, maybe for HVAC. But when we took the shelves down, we found a door. It was painted to match the plaster. It was sealed shut. Terrence stepped forward, peering into the gloom. So it is a storage closet. Mom was a hoarder. She probably kept old tax returns in there. No, Javier said. It is not a closet. He stepped aside and shined his heavy-duty flashlight into the darkness. I walked forward. My heart was pounding in my ears, a slow, heavy drumbeat. I stepped over the pile of broken bricks and entered the space. It was a room. Small, windowless, about 8 feet by 8 feet. The walls were lined with soundproofing foam, the kind used in recording studios. The air inside was stale, trapped for God knows how long. In the center of the room was a small metal desk and a single chair. On the desk there was a computer tower that looked high-tech, blinking with a small green light. It was connected to a series of wires that ran up into the ceiling vents. And next to the computer there was a thick black leather ledger. But that wasn't what stopped my breath. Sitting right in the center of the desk, illuminated by the beam of Javier's flashlight, was a bright red envelope. It was sealed with wax, and written on the front in Corinne's unmistakable elegant handwriting were the words, "To be opened only when Walter, Terrence, and Kendrick are all in the room." Meredith pushed past me, her curiosity finally outweighing her disdain. "What is that?" she asked sharply. Kendrick tried to squeeze in next to her. "Is it cash? Did she hide cash in here?" I stared at the envelope. I knew my wife. Corinne didn't do drama for the sake of drama. If she had built a secret room, if she had hidden this from me, from everyone, there was a reason, a heavy, dangerous reason. Javier stayed outside the room watching us like a sentry. "I found this an hour ago," he said. "I haven't touched anything except to verify the envelope wasn't booby-trapped. I know how Mrs. Jefferson was. She was careful." Terrence laughed a harsh, barking sound. "Booby-trapped. You have been watching too many movies. Give me that." He reached for the envelope. "Don't touch it," I shouted. My voice echoed in the small, soundproofed box. It came out deeper and stronger than I expected. Terrence froze his hand, hovering inches from the red paper. "Dad, come on. It is obviously a will or a trust. We need to open it." I stepped between him and the desk. I looked at the three of them. My family, the people who wanted to sell her lake house before the grass had grown on her grave, the people who checked their watches at her funeral. Corinne had brought us here. She had guided Javier's hand to break this wall today. I could feel her presence in the room, heavy and judging. "We will open it," I said, my voice dropping to a low rumble. "But we will do it with respect, and we will do it together." Meredith crossed her arms. "Well, hurry up then. It is dusty in here and I have a dinner reservation at 6. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy, heavier than paper should feel. I broke the wax seal. My fingers were trembling, but not from age. They were trembling from fear. I pulled out the contents. There was no money inside. There was no deed to a property. There was a silver USB drive and a single sheet of stationery. I unfolded the paper. I read the first line out loud, my voice cracking on the last word. "My dearest Walter, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. And it means you finally know what I have known for the last 6 months. You are standing in a room with snakes." Terrence's face went pale. Meredith's eyes narrowed into slits. Kendrick looked around the room as if expecting actual reptiles to drop from the ceiling. "What is that supposed to mean?" Meredith snapped. She was losing her composure. The mask was slipping. I looked at the USB drive in my hand. Then I looked at the computer on the desk. "It means," I said, looking straight at my oldest son, "that your mother didn't just die. She was watching. She was listening. And I think she has something to say to you." I sat down in the chair. It groaned under my weight. I reached out and plugged the USB drive into the computer. A folder popped up on the screen. It was full of audio files, hundreds of them, each one dated and time-stamped. The most recent one was dated 3 days before Corinne went into the coma. I moved the mouse. The cursor hovered over the file. "Dad, wait," Terrence said. There was panic in his voice now. Real, raw panic. "Maybe we should have a lawyer present. This seems private." "You wanted to be here, Terrence," I said. "You wanted to rush the funeral. You wanted to sell the house. You wanted everything fast. Well, here it is. Fast." I clicked play. The speakers crackled for a second. Then a voice filled the small room. It was crystal clear. It was Meredith's voice. And she was laughing. "He is so stupid," Meredith's voice said from the speakers. The recording was so clear it sounded like she was standing right next to me. "He actually thinks the cancer is natural." Then Terrence's voice answered. "Just make sure the signature on the loan documents looks real. If Mom wakes up before the transfer goes through, we are screwed." "Don't worry," Meredith replied on the recording. "She isn't waking up. I made sure of the dosage." The audio cut off. The silence in that room was louder than a scream. I slowly turned my chair around to face them. Terrence was white as a sheet, backing away toward the door. Meredith stood frozen, her mouth open but no sound coming out. Kendrick looked like he was about to vomit. Javier stepped into the doorway holding a sledgehammer blocking their exit. He wasn't smiling. I looked at my son. I looked at the woman he married. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see family. I saw targets. "Don't leave," I said softly. "We have a lot more files to listen to." Kendrick did not wait for an invitation. He squeezed past me into the small room, his eyes scanning every inch of the space with a hunger that was painful to watch. I knew my son. I knew about the gambling debts he had racked up in Atlantic City, and I knew about the loan sharks who had been calling his unlisted number. He was not looking for sentimental value. He was looking for salvation in the form of gold bars or stacks of cash. He pulled open the drawers of the metal desk with violent force. They rattled loudly in the soundproofed room. Empty. He checked under the desk. Nothing. He spun around and started tapping on the padded walls, looking for a safe or another hidden panel. "Where is it?" he hissed, his voice tight with panic. "There has to be something here. Mom would not build a secret room just to hide a desk. Where is the money, Dad?" I watched him tear through the room like a desperate animal. It broke my heart, but it also clarified things for me. Javier stood by the door, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. He knew what was coming. I looked at the equipment on the desk. It was not a vault. It was a listening post. The computer tower was connected to a series of high-end audio receivers. The wires ran up into the ceiling, vanishing into the ventilation system. Corinne had not built this room to hide her wealth. She had built it to protect it. "This is not a bank vault, Kendrick," I said, my voice low and steady. "Stop tearing the place apart." Kendrick stopped, his hand resting on a black box with blinking red lights. He looked at it confused. "What is this junk?" "This looks like something from a spy movie." "Why would Mom have this?" "Because she knew," I said. "She knew something was rotting in her company, and she needed to find the source." I sat down in the leather chair. It was high-quality ergonomic, the kind Corinne bought because she knew she would be sitting in it for hours. I could almost smell her perfume, faint, but present, lavender and steel. I reached for the USB drive I had taken from the red envelope. My hand hovered over the port. Meredith stepped closer, her heels sinking slightly into the exposed subfloor. "Walter, this is absurd. Whatever paranoid delusions Corinne had at the end of her life do not concern us. She was on heavy medication, we all know that. Let us just go." I looked up at her. Her face was composed, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes, a tiny crack in the porcelain mask. "If it is just delusions, then you have nothing to worry about, Meredith," I said. I inserted the drive. The computer hummed to life. The screen was already on, displaying a simple file directory. There were no documents, no spreadsheets, just audio files, hundreds of them. Each one was labeled with a date and a time. I scrolled to the bottom of the list. The most recent file was dated November 12th. That was 3 days before Corinne went into the coma. That was the week she was in the hospital, supposedly resting. I clicked the file. The speakers were high fidelity. The sound that filled the room was crisp and immediate. It started with the sound of a door closing, then footsteps, then a voice I knew better than my own. "It is done." The notary did not even look at the ID. That was Terrence, my firstborn, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man who stood here now wiping sweat from his forehead. Then came the second voice, smooth, calculating, good, and the signature. "Does it look authentic?" That was Meredith. I watched them as the recording played. Terrence flinched as if he had been slapped. Meredith went rigid, her eyes locking onto the spinning graphic of the media player on the screen. On the recording, Terrence laughed nervously. "It looks exactly like hers. I practiced it for 3 hours last night. But Meredith, are you sure about this? $2 million is a lot of leverage. If she wakes up and checks the accounts..." "She is not waking up, Terrence." Meredith's voice on the recording was cold. It lacked any warmth, any humanity. It was the voice of a butcher discussing a piece of meat. "The doctor said the new cocktail of sedatives will keep her under for at least another week. By the time she is lucid, if she ever becomes lucid again, the loan will be processed and the funds will be in the Cayman account. We will tell her it was a necessary liquidity injection for the new project. She will be too weak to fight us." I felt a wave of nausea roll over me. I gripped the armrests of the chair until my fingers ached. My wife, my Corinne. She was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life, and these two were in her office practicing her signature and banking on her death. On the recording, the sound of paper shuffling was audible. "Just sign here," Terrence Meredith said, "and here. Congratulations, honey. You are finally a rich man." "But what about Dad?" Terrence asked on the tape. "What if he sees the bank statements?" "Walter." Meredith laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "Walter is a dinosaur. He thinks he is a partner, but he is just a mascot. He will be too busy crying by her bedside to notice we have gutted the operating capital. We will give him a nice allowance and send him to Florida. He won't ask questions." The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I sat there staring at the screen. The betrayal was physical. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. They had not just stolen money. They had stolen my dignity. They had looked at my grief and saw it as an opportunity. They had looked at my dying wife and saw her as an obstacle. I slowly turned the chair around. Kendrick was staring at his brother, his mouth open. Even in his greed, he looked shocked by the magnitude of the theft. $2 million, he whispered. You guys took $2 million, and you told me the company was broke. You told me you could not help me with my debt. Terrence was leaning against the wall, looking like he might faint. He could not meet my eyes. He looked at the floor, at his shoes, at the dust. Anywhere but at me. But Meredith. Meredith did not look away. She stood tall, her arms crossed over her chest. She did not look ashamed. She looked annoyed. She looked like a teacher who had caught a student with a cheat sheet but knew the student could not be expelled because his parents donated the library. Is that it? She asked. I blinked. I expected tears. I expected denials. I expected her to say the recording was taken out of context. Is that it? I repeated, my voice hoarse. You just heard yourself conspiring to commit fraud. You just heard yourself wishing for my wife's death. And you ask, is that it? Meredith stepped forward. She reached past me. Her hand moved fast. She pressed the power button on the monitor. The screen went black, cutting off the evidence. She straightened up and smoothed her blazer. It is an illegal recording, Walter. In this state, two-party consent is required for audio recording. That file is inadmissible in court. Any lawyer worth his salt would have it thrown out in a pretrial motion. So yes, is that it? Because I have a dinner reservation and I am tired of standing in this dust. I looked at her and I saw the monster Corinne had warned me about. She was not afraid because she thought she had won. She thought the law was a game and she knew the rules better than I did. You think this is a game, Meredith? I asked, standing up. My knees popped, but I stood tall. I towered over her. I think it is business, she said coolly. Corinne was old-fashioned. She was holding the company back with her sentimental attachments to these crumbling buildings. We did what we had to do to save the legacy. We modernized. And if we had to bend a few rules to do it, so be it. She turned to Terrence. Come on, we are leaving. Your father is clearly overwrought. Terrence hesitated. He looked at me, then at her. The habit of obedience was strong. He took a step toward her. You are walking out, I asked him, after what I just heard. Terrence swallowed hard. Dad, look. You do not understand high finance. We needed the capital. Mom would not listen. We did it for the family. For the family, I repeated. Meredith laughed again, that same sharp laugh from the recording. Don't be dramatic, Walter. Who do you think runs the company now? You own shares, yes, but Terrence and I hold the voting rights by proxy. You signed them over when Corinne got sick, remember? You were so grief-stricken, you just wanted us to handle the paperwork. I remembered. I remembered her putting the papers in front of me at the hospital cafeteria, telling me it was just standard procedure to keep the payroll going. I had signed them without reading because I trusted them. So go ahead, Meredith said, walking to the door. Take that little USB drive to the police. Watch them laugh at you. Watch the stock price tank. Watch your legacy burn. Or you can be a good boy, go home and let the adults handle the business. She stepped out into the hallway. Terrence followed her like a whipped dog. Kendrick lingered for a second, looking at the computer, then at me. Then he turned and ran after the money. I stood there in the silence. Javier stepped forward and put a hand on my shoulder. I am sorry, Mr. Jefferson, he said. I looked at the black screen. Don't be, Javier, I said. Now I know. Corinne didn't leave me this recording to break my heart. She left it to harden it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I dialed the number of the only person Corinne had told me to trust in the letter. Caldwell, I said when the line connected. It is Walter. You were right. They are not family. They are targets. Tell me what I need to do next. You would think that hearing your own voice plotting a crime would shame a person. You would think that being caught red-handed wishing for the death of a mother would make a son fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness. But I forgot who I was dealing with. I was not dealing with family. I was dealing with parasites. And parasites do not feel shame. They only feel hunger. Meredith did not flinch. She did not cry. Instead, she laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that bounced off the soundproof walls of that small room. She looked at me holding the phone and shook her head with a look of pity that made my stomach turn. Oh, Walter, she said, stepping closer to me, her perfume filling my nose. This is truly sad. Lee, I knew you were struggling with grief, but I did not know it had gotten this bad. Do you really think anyone will believe that recording? I lowered the phone. What are you talking about, Meredith? That is your voice. That is Terrence's voice. Is it? She asked, tilting her head. Or is it something Javier cooked up on a computer? Deepfake technology is everywhere now, Walter. Anyone can take a few clips of my voice from company presentations and make me say whatever they want. It is a digital fabrication, and frankly, it is a desperate attempt by a confused old man to hold on to power he does not understand. She turned to Terrence. Tell him, honey. Tell your father how worried we have been about his mental state. Terrence looked at me. For a second, I saw hesitation in his eyes, but then he looked at his wife, and the fear of losing her approval outweighed the love for his father. He straightened his tie and put on his business face. She is right, Dad. You have not been yourself since the funeral. You have been forgetting things. You have been paranoid. Remember last week when you thought the gardener stole your watch, but you had left it on the nightstand? I stared at him. I left it on the nightstand because you moved it, Terrence. I know what I saw. See, Meredith interrupted. Paranoia, confusion. It is classic early onset dementia. If you take that fake recording to the police, Walter, we will have to tell them about your condition. We will have to show them the medical evaluations we have been preparing. We will have to petition the court for guardianship to protect you from yourself. Do you really want to spend your final years in a locked facility while we manage the estate? The room spun. They were twisting reality right in front of my eyes. They were taking the truth and strangling it until it looked like a lie. This was not just greed, this was gaslighting. They were trying to make me doubt my own sanity. But there was one thing they could not fake, one thing that was not digital. While Meredith was weaving her web of lies, Kendrick had been busy. He had ignored the argument. He was still hunting for treasure, and he found it. Kendrick pulled a loose panel from the bottom of the desk. Behind it was a heavy black book. It was an old-fashioned accounting ledger bound in leather, the kind Corinne used when she first started the business 40 years ago. Jackpot, Kendrick whispered. He threw the book onto the desk and flipped it open. Dust flew into the air. Look at this, he said, his finger tracing the lines of handwritten numbers. These are not tax returns. These are transfer logs. Look at the dates. Every time you guys said we had a cash flow problem, Mom was moving money out. Meredith stopped talking. Her eyes snapped to the book. She moved fast, faster than I thought possible in those heels. She pushed Kendrick aside and looked at the page. What is this? She hissed. It is proof, Kendrick said. Look here. Cayman Islands. Switzerland. She was hiding assets, Meredith. Millions of dollars. And look at this entry from last month. It says, evidence against M&T regarding unauthorized loan. The color drained from Meredith's face. The recording was one thing. A digital file could be challenged, but a handwritten ledger in Corinne handwriting detailing their crimes and the location of the hidden money was a death sentence. It was the smoking gun. We cannot let anyone see this, Meredith said. Her voice was low, dangerous. She grabbed the ledger. What are you doing? Kendrick shouted, reaching for it. That is the money map. We need that. No, Meredith snapped. This is prison time, Kendrick. If the auditors see this, we all go to jail for fraud. This book does not exist. She turned toward the far wall. This office was old, but we had started renovations. One of the few things Javier had finished was testing the gas line for the vintage fireplace. The pilot light was on a small blue flame dancing behind the grate. Meredith marched toward it. No, I shouted. I lunged forward. I forgot my cane. I forgot my bad hip. I only saw my wife handwriting about to be turned into ash. I moved to intercept her. Stop her, Terrence! Meredith screamed. I was 3 feet away from her when I felt a hand on my chest. It was not a gentle hand. It was a shove. A hard, violent shove. I looked up and saw my son. Terrence. His face was twisted in a grimace of panic and aggression. Sit down, old man, he yelled. He pushed me. I flew backward. My feet tangled in the loose wires on the floor. I hit the ground hard. My hips slammed into the concrete subfloor, sending a bolt of white-hot pain shooting up my spine. My head cracked against the metal leg of the desk. Dad Kendrick yelled, but he did not move to help me. He just stood there watching. I lay there gasping for air, the pain blinding me for a moment. Through the haze, I saw Meredith throw the heavy leather book into the fireplace. She reached down and turned the gas valve all the way up. The fire roared to life. The flames licked the leather cover, curling the edges. The pages caught fire. I watched 40 years of my wife hard work, her meticulous notes, her final protection for her family burn. The smoke filled the room, smelling of burning paper and leather. I tried to get up, but my leg would not support me. I was helpless. I was a man who had built skyscrapers, who had raised 3 children, who had carried his wife's casket, and now I was lying in the dust, pushed down by my own blood while a stranger burned my history. Meredith stood back watching the fire with a satisfied smile. She dusted off her hands as if she had just taken out the trash. "It is for the best, Walter," she said, looking down at me. "Corinne would not want her company to be destroyed by a scandal. We are saving the family name. You should thank us." Terrence was breathing hard, staring at his hands, the hands that had just assaulted his father. He looked sick, but he did not apologize. He looked at Meredith for reassurance. "Did I hurt him?" he asked weakly. "He is fine," Meredith said. "He tripped." That is what happened. He was confused, he got agitated, and he tripped. Javier saw it right. She turned her cold eyes to the contractor standing in the doorway. Javier had not moved during the scuffle. His fists were clenched at his sides, so tight his knuckles were white. He looked ready to kill Terrence. But he looked at me, and I gave him a tiny shake of my head. "Not yet. Not like this." Javier took a deep breath. He walked over to me, ignoring Meredith and Terrence. He knelt down his strong arms, lifting me up with a gentleness that made me want to weep. "Easy, Mr. Jefferson," he said. "I have got you. Put your weight on me." He helped me stand. My leg was throbbing, but I stood. I brushed the dust off my coat. I looked at the fireplace. The ledger was a black, crumbling mess. The evidence was gone. Meredith checked her watch. "Well, that is done. We need to go. I will have the cleaning crew come in the morning to clear out the rest of this junk. And Walter, expect the legal papers tomorrow. We are doing this for your own good." She walked out. Terrence followed, keeping his head down, avoiding my gaze. Kendrick lingered for a second, looking at the ashes, then ran after them. I stood there, leaning on Javier, listening to their footsteps fade down the hallway. I felt hollowed out, defeated. "They won," I whispered. "They burned it, Javier. They burned the proof." Javier guided me toward the door, away from the smoke. He leaned in close to my ear. His voice was barely a whisper, but it sounded like thunder. "Mr. Jefferson," he said, "look at me." I looked at him. "Mrs. Jefferson knew they would try to destroy it," he said. "She knew they would burn it or shred it. That book in the fire was a prop. I bought it at an antique store yesterday and filled it with random papers." My heart skipped a beat. "Then where is the real one?" I asked. Javier smiled, a grim, determined smile. "The real ledger, the original notarized copy, was sent to the district attorney office 3 days ago," he said, "along with a copy of every audio file. Mrs. Jefferson said you needed to see how far they would go. She said you needed to see if they would burn her memory to save their skins." I looked back at the dying fire. I felt the pain in my hip, but the pain in my heart was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "They pushed me down," I said quietly. My son put his hands on me. "Yes, sir," Javier said, and the camera in the corner of the ceiling recorded every second of it. I straightened my back. The pain was still there, but I could walk. "Good," I said. "Let them think they won. Let them think I am a confused old man who tripped. Because when the hammer falls, I want them to never see it coming. Take me home, Javier. We have a war to prepare for." I stood there in the hallway of the building that Corinne and I had bought 30 years ago. I remembered the day we closed the deal. The previous owner, a man who did not want to sell to a black couple, had made us wait in the lobby for 3 hours. When we finally signed the papers, Corinne squeezed my hand so hard her fingernails left marks. She said, "Walter, this is ours. Nobody can ever move us from here." But now, 30 years later, I was being moved, and it was not by a bank or a racist landlord. It was by my own family. "Security." Meredith shouted, her voice echoing off the marble floors we had paid to restore. "We have a trespasser on the 4th floor. He is agitated and potentially violent. Please remove him immediately." I looked at her. She did not even blink. She had just watched her husband push me down. She had just burned evidence, and now she was playing the victim. 2 men in uniforms appeared from the stairwell. They were new. I did not recognize them. Corinne and I used to know the names of every janitor and security guard in the building. We knew their children's names. These men were strangers, big and indifferent, hired by the new management. Hired by Meredith. "Sir," the taller guard said, stepping into my personal space. "You need to vacate the premises." "I am Walter Jefferson," I said, straightening my coat. "I own this building." "Not anymore," Meredith said from the doorway. She held up her phone. "I am the acting CEO and I have power of attorney. This man is a former employee who is having a mental health episode. Get him out before he hurts himself or someone else." The guard reached for my arm. His grip was tight, impersonal. It was the grip of a man who was just doing a job and did not care about the truth. "Don't touch me," I said, pulling my arm back. "I walked into this building on my own 2 feet, and I will walk out on my own 2 feet." Javier stepped between me and the guard. He was shorter than them, but he was made of muscle and concrete. "Back off," Javier growled. "He is leaving. You don't need to put hands on him." Meredith smirked. "Make sure they are off the property completely, and deactivate their key cards. I don't want them coming back to harass my staff." I looked at Terrence one last time. He was standing behind his wife looking at his shoes. He could not even look at me while I was being thrown out like garbage. We walked to the elevator. The ride down was silent. The humiliation burned in my chest hotter than the pain in my hip. I had built the foundation of this place. I had poured the concrete. I had hung the drywall. And now I was being escorted out like a criminal because I dared to speak the truth. When we got to the lobby, the guard followed us all the way to the glass doors. He opened the door and gestured for us to leave. "Stay out, old man," he said. "Next time we call the cops." The heavy glass door clicked shut behind us. I stood on the sidewalk, the cold wind hitting my face. Passers-by walked around us, ignoring the old black man standing next to a contractor covered in dust. They did not know that I was a king in exile. They just saw a defeated old man. Javier opened the door of his truck. "Come on, Mr. Jefferson, let me take you home." I got in. I did not look back at the building. I could not. It hurt too much. The ride to my house was a blur. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The shove, the fire, the lies. How had I been so blind? How had I let them get this much power? Corinne had tried to warn me. She had left clues. But I had been too busy grieving to see the sharks circling in the water. Javier dropped me off at my driveway. "Are you going to be okay, sir?" he asked, looking worried. "Maybe I should stay." "No," I said. "You have done enough, Javier. You have a family to go home to. Go. I need to think." I walked up the path to my front door. The house was dark. It was a big house, too big for one person now that Corinne was gone. I fumbled with my keys, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. I opened the door and stepped inside. The silence of the house usually comforted me. Today it felt like a trap. There was an envelope taped to the inside of the foyer mirror. It was not a regular letter. It was a thick manila envelope with the seal of the county court. I ripped it open. My heart started to hammer against my ribs again. It was an ex parte order, emergency temporary guardianship. I read the legal jargon, my eyes blurring with rage. Petitioner Terrence Jefferson, respondent Walter Jefferson. The allegations were laid out in black and white, twisting every moment of my grief into a symptom of madness. Item 1. The respondent has shown signs of severe aggression and confusion following the death of his spouse. Item 2. The respondent was involved in a physical altercation at the company offices on this date requiring security intervention. Item 3. The respondent has been making wild, unsubstantiated claims about family members indicative of paranoid delusions. Item 4. The respondent is unable to manage his financial affairs and is at risk of being exploited by third parties. I dropped the papers. They fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. Exploited by third parties. They meant Javier. They were framing my only ally as a con artist and framing me as a senile victim. And then I saw the signature at the bottom. It was Terrence's signature, the same shaky hand that had signed the fraudulent loan documents. He had signed away my freedom. This order gave them control, total control. They could freeze my bank accounts. They could make medical decisions for me. They could decide where I lived. I ran to the kitchen phone. I needed to call my lawyer. I needed to call the police. I lifted the receiver. There was no dial tone, just a dead, empty silence. I checked the cord. It was plugged in. I checked my cell phone. No service. They had cut me off. Panic, cold and sharp, started to rise in my throat. This was not just a legal maneuver. This was a siege. They knew I had seen the ledger. They knew I knew about the loan. They were not waiting for a court date. They were neutralizing the threat immediately. I went to the front window and looked out through the blinds. The street was quiet. The neighbors were inside having dinner, living their normal lives. They had no idea that in the house across the street a man was being erased. I checked the back door. Locked. I checked the windows. Locked. I was a prisoner in the home I had paid for. I went into the living room and sat down in my armchair. The room was pitch black. I did not turn on the lights. I did not want them to know where I was in the house. I sat there gripping the arms of the chair, listening to the house settle. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. I thought about Corinne. I thought about how she fought cancer for 2 years without complaining. She never gave up. She never let them see her weak. "I am not weak," I whispered to the darkness. "I am Walter Jefferson, and I am not done yet." But then headlights swept across the living room wall, bright, blinding white lights cutting through the darkness. I stood up and moved to the edge of the window. A black sedan had pulled up to the curb. It was not a police car. It was not a taxi. It was a sleek, expensive private car with tinted windows. The back door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a long coat and carrying a black medical bag. I recognized him immediately. It was Dr. Sterling, Meredith's private concierge doctor. The man who wrote prescriptions for whatever Meredith wanted. The man who had signed Corinne's death certificate without asking questions. He was not alone. 2 large men in white orderly uniforms got out of the front seat. They were not smiling. They looked like the guards at the office, only worse. They looked like they enjoyed their job. Dr. Sterling looked up at my house. He checked a clipboard in his hand. Then he nodded to the 2 men. They started walking up my driveway. My heart stopped. This was it. This was the moment Meredith had threatened. They were not coming to check my blood pressure. They were coming to take me away. They were coming to sedate me, put me in a car, and drive me to a facility where nobody would ever listen to the rantings of a crazy old man. I looked around the dark room. I had no weapon. I had no phone. I had no way out. But I remembered the last thing Javier had said to me. The real ledger was safe. The evidence was safe. They could take my body. They could lock me up. But they could not lock up the truth. But I was not going to make it easy for them. I moved away from the window and retreated into the shadows of the hallway. If they wanted Walter Jefferson, they were going to have to come into the dark to get him. And in the dark, I knew every floorboard, every corner, every loose rug. I waited. The doorbell rang. It was a long, insistent sound that echoed through the empty house like a funeral toll. Then came the knock, heavy, authoritative. "Mr. Jefferson," Dr. Sterling's voice called out, smooth and fake. "Open the door. We are here to help you. Meredith is very worried about you." I did not answer. I stood at the top of the stairs, breathing quietly, waiting for the sound of the lock being picked. I was alone, but I was ready. The pounding on the front door was getting louder. It echoed through the house like the heartbeat of a dying animal. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, listening to the man who signed my wife's death certificate calling my name. "Open up, Walter," he shouted. "We just want to make sure you are safe." Safe! That was the word they used. But I knew what they meant. They meant silent. They meant controlled. They meant erased. I looked at the front door one last time. Through the frosted glass, I could see the distorted silhouette of Dr. Sterling and the 2 large orderlies. They were getting impatient. I heard the metallic scratch of a lockpick. They were not waiting for permission. They were breaking in. I turned and moved as fast as my bad hip would allow toward the kitchen. I did not turn on any lights. I navigated by memory. My hand brushed against the counter where Corinne used to roll out biscuit dough on Sunday mornings. I felt a pang of grief so sharp it almost brought me to my knees. This house was not just wood and brick. It was her. And I was abandoning it. I reached the back door. I unlocked the deadbolt, trying to be as quiet as a ghost. The mechanism clicked. To me, it sounded like a gunshot, but the pounding at the front covered the noise. I slipped out into the cold night air. The wind hit me instantly, biting through my thin jacket. I did not stop. I limped across the backyard past the rose bushes Corinne had planted, past the gazebo where we renewed our vows 10 years ago. I reached the back gate that led to the alleyway. I unlatched it and slipped through. I was out. But I was not free. Not yet. I walked. I walked until the large, silent houses of my wealthy neighborhood were far behind me. I walked until the manicured lawns turned into cracked pavement, and the silence was replaced by the sound of distant sirens and barking dogs. I was walking toward the neighborhood where I grew up, the neighborhood my son Terrence was ashamed of, the neighborhood where Javier lived. Here the streetlights were broken and the houses needed paint, but there was life. I saw people sitting on porches. I heard music thumping from passing cars. In my gated community, nobody sat on porches. They hid behind high walls and security systems. My house had become a prison of marble and glass. Here, in the crumbling streets, I finally felt the air in my lungs again. I found a payphone outside a liquor store. It was a relic covered in graffiti, but it worked. I dialed Javier's number. "I am out," I said when he answered. "But I have nothing, Javier. They froze the accounts. They cut the cards. I am a ghost." "Stay where you are, Mr. Jefferson," Javier said. "I am coming." "No," I said. "I need to do something first. Meet me at the old garage on 5th Street, the one where we used to fix the company trucks." "But why?" Javier asked. "Because wars cost money," I said, "and I need to buy some ammunition." I hung up and walked 2 more blocks to a fenced lot filled with old cars. A man named Red ran this place. He bought anything and he asked no questions. I was not there to sell a stolen car. I was there to sell my heart. Parked in the back of the lot under a tarp I paid Red to keep, there was my 1968 Chevy C10. It was cherry red. It was the first new thing Corinne and I ever bought when the business started making real money. We drove that truck to job sites. We drove it to the hospital when Terrence was born. It was not just a truck, it was a member of the family. I pulled the tarp off. The chrome bumper shined under the floodlight. It looked beautiful. It looked like 1968. It looked like hope. Red walked out of his office wiping grease from his hands. He looked at me, then at the truck. "You finally selling it, Walter?" he asked. I nodded. My throat was so tight I could barely speak. "I need cash, Red. Tonight." Red walked around the truck, kicking the tires. He knew what it was worth. Fully restored, it could fetch $40,000 at an auction. But he also knew I was desperate. I could see the calculation in his eyes. "I can give you $5,000, he said. "Cash, no paperwork. $5,000. It was an insult. It was a robbery. But I did not have time to haggle. I did not have time for auctions. My enemies were moving fast, and I needed to move faster. "Deal," I said. Red went into his office and came back with a thick envelope. He counted the bills into my hand. They were greasy and smelled of stale tobacco. I looked at the money. It felt dirty. It felt like blood money. I walked over to the truck one last time. I opened the door. The smell of the interior hit me. Old leather and the peppermint gum Corinne used to keep in the glove box. I ran my hand over the steering wheel. I remembered holding Corinne's hand right here on this bench seat, telling her that one day we would own the skyline. "I am sorry, baby," I whispered. "I am so sorry." I closed the door. The sound was solid heavy, the sound of a vault closing on a memory. I tossed the keys to Red. I turned my back on the truck and walked out of the gate. I put the envelope in my inside pocket. I was $5,000 richer and infinitely poorer. Javier was waiting for me at the corner in his work van. He saw my face. He saw the empty lot behind me. He knew what I had done. "You loved that truck," he said softly as I climbed in. "I love my wife more," I said. "Drive. Take me to Caldwell." We drove in silence. The city lights blurred past the window. I felt lighter somehow. I had shed the last material possession that tied me to the past. Now I was just a man with a mission. We pulled up to a small brownstone in a quiet part of town. This was not the glass and steel tower where Meredith corporate lawyers worked. This was a place where real people came for help. The lights were on inside. She was expecting us. Evelyn Caldwell opened the door before I could knock. She was a woman of 60 with eyes that had seen everything and judged most of it unworthy. She had been Corinne's best friend since college. She was the only lawyer Corinne trusted because Evelyn did not care about money. She cared about justice. She looked at me. She saw the dust on my coat, the exhaustion in my face, the way I favored my bad leg. She did not offer me tea. She did not offer me sympathy. She stepped aside and motioned for us to enter. "You look like hell, Walter," she said, closing the door and locking it. "They tried to take me, Evelyn," I said, sinking into a chair in her study. "They have an order. They say I am incompetent. They say I have dementia." "I know," she said, walking behind her desk. "I saw the filing an hour ago." Terrence moved fast, faster than I expected. She opened a drawer and pulled out a bottle of bourbon. She poured 2 glasses, one for me, one for herself. She pushed mine across the desk. "Drink," she ordered. "You are going to need it." I took a sip. The alcohol burned, but it warmed the cold place in my chest. "Is it over, Evelyn?" I asked. "Do they win? Do they—" They have the power of attorney. They have the assets. They burned the ledger, Walter. Evelyn stopped mid-sip. She lowered her glass. A slow, terrifying smile spread across her face. They burned the ledger, she asked. Yes. Meredith threw it in the fire. Good, Evelyn said. That is exactly what Corinne hoped they would do. I looked at her confused. Javier had told me the ledger was fake, but I did not understand the endgame. Walter, Evelyn said, leaning forward. Corinne knew Meredith was a snake, but she also knew Meredith was arrogant. She knew that if Meredith thought she had destroyed the evidence, she would get sloppy. She would make mistakes. She would feel safe. She opened a safe behind her desk. She pulled out a thick black binder. It was not a ledger, it was a trust document. But it looked different from any legal paper I had ever seen. This, she said, tapping the cover, is the Shadow Trust. Corinne created it 5 years ago. It is a dormant legal entity. It owns nothing. It controls nothing until one specific condition is met. What condition, I asked. The destruction of the decoy ledger, Evelyn said. My mouth fell open. Corinne had not just set a trap. She had rigged the entire game. When Meredith burned that book, Evelyn continued, she did not destroy evidence. She triggered a clause in Corinne will that activates this trust. You see, Walter, Corinne moved the ownership of the land, the buildings, the intellectual property, everything into this trust years ago. But she left the voting rights with the company so Meredith would not notice. But the moment the decoy is destroyed or you are declared incompetent by a family member, the voting rights revert to the trust. And who controls the trust? I asked, my heart pounding. Evelyn slid the binder toward me. You do, Walter. But not alone. She opened the binder to the last page. There was a list of names. You control it alongside a board of directors, Evelyn said. And do you know who is on that board? I looked at the list. I saw Javier's name. I saw the names of the foremen who had worked for us for 30 years. I saw the name of the woman who ran the soup kitchen Corinne supported. She gave the company to the people who built it, Evelyn said. I sat back stunned. The genius of it. The beauty of it. But Walter, Evelyn said, her voice turning serious. Her eyes locked onto mine. There is a catch. This trust is a nuclear option. Once you activate it, the company as you know it ceases to exist. The assets are liquidated to pay off debts and the rest goes to charity. There will be no inheritance for anyone, not even you. I touched the envelope of money in my pocket. The money from my truck. It was all I had left. I don't want the money, I said. I want them stopped. Evelyn nodded. She reached into the safe again. This time she pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a subpoena. Corinne knew this day would come, she said. She left you a weapon, Walter, but it is a dangerous one. This is a subpoena for the bank records of the shell company Meredith used to hide the loan, but we can only serve it if we have probable cause. We have the recording, I said. The recording is inadmissible, Evelyn said. But your testimony is not. You have to stand up in front of a judge, Walter. You have to stand up in front of the world and declare your own son a criminal. You have to be the one to swing the sword. She pushed the paper toward me. Corinne left you a gun, she said softly. But she only gave you one bullet. You have to shoot to kill Walter. If you miss, if you hesitate, they will bury you in that institution and they will never let you out. Are you ready to pull the trigger? The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old lies. It was a cold, sterile place where lives were dismantled on paper and dignity was stripped away by men in expensive suits. I sat at the defendant table next to Evelyn Caldwell. My hands were folded on my lap. I was trying to keep them from shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning a hole through my chest. Across the aisle sat my son Terrence and his wife Meredith. They looked like the picture of grieving concern. Meredith was wearing a modest black dress and pearls, holding a handkerchief she did not need. Terrence looked somber, his head bowed as if this whole ordeal was breaking his heart. It was a performance, a masterclass in deception. And the audience was Judge Harrison, a man with silver hair and a country club membership who looked at Meredith with the soft eyes of a grandfather and at me with the cold stare of a warden. Meredith's lawyer stood up. His name was Mr. Sterling, and he wore a suit that cost more than the truck I had just sold. He walked toward the judge, his voice smooth and practiced. Your Honor, he began, we are not here to punish Mr. Jefferson. We are here to protect him. Since the tragic death of his wife, Corinne Mr. Jefferson has exhibited a rapid and alarming decline in mental faculties. We have statements from household staff, security personnel, and even his own children detailing episodes of confusion, paranoia, and unchecked aggression. He turned and pointed a finger at me. It felt like a weapon. This man believes his own family is conspiring against him, Sterling continued. He has abandoned his home. He has been found wandering in dangerous neighborhoods associating with individuals of questionable character. He is selling off personal assets for cash, engaging in erratic financial behavior that endangers the estate his wife worked so hard to build. We are simply asking the court to grant temporary conservatorship to his son and daughter-in-law so they can ensure his safety and preserve the family legacy. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to shout that I was not wandering, I was escaping. I wanted to scream that I was selling assets because they had stolen my money. But Evelyn placed a hand on my arm. Her grip was iron. "Don't," she whispered without moving her lips. "If you shout, you prove them right." So I sat there. I sat there and let them paint a portrait of a man I did not recognize. They turned my grief into madness. They turned my silence into confusion. They turned my life into a case file. I looked at Terrence. He refused to meet my eye. He was letting a stranger call his father crazy because he was too much of a coward to do it himself. Then came the evidence, Sterling said. He nodded to the bailiff, who dimmed the lights. A large screen descended from the ceiling. "Your Honor, the family was hesitant to share this," Sterling said, his voice dripping with fake reluctance. "But we feel it is necessary to show the court the level of volatility we are dealing with. This footage was taken 3 weeks ago inside the family home. The video started playing. It was grainy, taken from a security camera in the living room. On the screen, I saw myself. I was pacing back and forth. I looked agitated. Then the video cut forward. I was standing by the dining table. I was shouting. The audio was muffled, but the anger was clear. Then on the screen, I picked up a vase and smashed it against the wall. I slammed my fist onto the table so hard the wood cracked. The courtroom gasped. Judge Harrison frowned, adjusting his glasses. I stared at the screen. I remembered that day. It was the day I found out Meredith had canceled Corinne home hospice care without telling me, forcing her back into the hospital where she was isolated. I was not crazy. I was heartbroken. I was a husband grieving the loss of his wife, final comfort. But the video did not show the phone call I had just received. It did not show the context. It had been edited, chopped up, and stitched together to make me look like a violent monster destroying his own home for no reason. "Objection," Evelyn shouted, standing up. "Your Honor, this footage is heavily edited and lacks context. Mr. Jefferson was reacting to distressing news regarding his wife medical care. This is prejudicial." Judge Harrison waved his hand dismissively. "Overruled, Ms. Caldwell. The video speaks to the respondent temperament. Sit down." He looked at me. His eyes were hard. "Mr. Jefferson," he said, "do you deny that is you in the video destroying property?" I stood up slowly. Evelyn tried to stop me, but I pulled away. "That is me, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. But I was not destroying property. I was expressing grief. Something my son seems to have forgotten how to do. The judge narrowed his eyes. "You will address the court with respect, Mr. Jefferson. Based on the testimony and this video evidence, I am inclined to agree with the petitioners. It appears you are a danger to yourself and the estate." He banged his gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot executing my freedom. "I am granting the temporary emergency conservatorship," Judge Harrison declared. "All assets belonging to Walter Jefferson, including bank accounts, real estate, and vehicles, are hereby frozen and placed under the control of the conservators Terrence and Meredith Jefferson." Evelyn was on her feet again. "Your Honor, Mr. Jefferson needs living expenses. You cannot leave him with nothing." The judge sighed as if we were wasting his time. "Mr. Jefferson will be granted a monthly allowance of $500 for incidentals," the judge said. "The conservators will handle all housing and medical bills directly. This order is effective immediately. Court is adjourned." $500. I had built a multi-million-dollar company. I had signed checks for skyscrapers. And now I was being given an allowance like a child. The bailiff moved toward me as if to escort me out. I felt numb. The system I had believed in, the law Corinne had respected, had just been used to enslave me. Meredith and Terrence stood up. They were smiling now. The grieving mask was gone, replaced by the triumphant look of predators who had just secured their kill. They walked past our table. Terrence looked away, but Meredith stopped. She leaned in close to me. She smelled of expensive perfume and rot. She brought her lips to my ear. Her voice was a whisper, soft and terrifying. "Be a good boy, Walter," she said. "If you behave, we might let you keep the house. If not, well, $500 does not buy much food. Be obedient and you might get some porridge." She pulled back, winking at me. Then she took her husband's arm and walked out of the courtroom, her heels clicking a victory march on the marble floor. I stood there watching them go. I felt the $5,000 in my pocket, the money from my truck. It was hidden from the court. It was illegal. And it was the only freedom I had left. Evelyn packed her briefcase. She looked furious. "This isn't over, Walter," she said. "But for now you have to be invisible. They have the law. But we have the truth." I looked at the judge bench, then at the door where my son had exited. "They can have the law," I said quietly. "I am done with the law. Now I am going to use their own greed to hang them." I walked out of the courtroom not as a defeated man, but as a soldier going underground. The war had just begun. The house was cold. They had cut the heating 2 days ago. I was sitting in the dark, wrapped in a blanket Corinne had knitted while she was undergoing chemo. I was hungry. Not the kind of hunger you feel when you skip lunch. I was feeling the deep, hollow hunger of a man who had been stripped of his resources. The $500 allowance the judge had granted me was still being processed by the bank. I was living on tap water and the few cans of soup I had hidden in the pantry. Then came the knock. It was not the aggressive pounding of the police or the process servers. It was a timid, rhythmic knock, too fast, one slow. It was the secret knock my boys used when they were teenagers coming home late after curfew. I stood up, my joints popping in the cold air. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Kendrick, my youngest son. He looked terrible. His expensive jacket was wrinkled. His eyes were red and swollen. He was holding a grease-stained paper bag from the soul food place on Martin Luther King Boulevard. The smell of fried chicken and cornbread seeped through the cracks of the door and hit me like a physical blow. It smelled like better times. It smelled like family dinners before the money ruined us. I unlocked the deadbolt. Kendrick stood there shivering. He looked up at me and his lip trembled. "Daddy," he whispered. He had not called me daddy in 20 years. He was a grown man of 36, but in that moment, under the porch light, he looked like the little boy who used to scrape his knees and run to me for a Band-Aid. "I am so sorry, Daddy," he sobbed. "I brought you dinner. I know they cut you off. I could not let you starve." I looked at him. I looked for the deception. I looked for the trap. But all I saw was a broken man holding a bag of chicken. My heart, which I thought had turned to stone, cracked open just a little bit. He was still my blood. He was the baby of the family. Corinne had always spoiled him because he was the sensitive one. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Kendrick walked into the cold, dark hallway. He shivered violently. "Jesus, Dad, it is freezing in here. Did she cut the heat too?" I nodded, closing the door and locking it. "She cuts everything, Kendrick. That is what she does." We went into the kitchen. I lit a candle because I did not want to turn on the lights and show the neighbors I was home. Kendrick unpacked the food. The steam rose from the chicken, warm and inviting. He sat down opposite me, but he did not eat. He just watched me tear into a drumstick with a hunger I was ashamed to show. "She made me do it, Dad," Kendrick said, his voice shaking. "You have to believe me. Meredith told me if I did not sign the affidavit against you, she would tell the police about my gambling debts. She said she would let the loan sharks break my legs. I was scared, Dad. I am a coward. I know I am." He put his head in his hands and wept. I stopped eating. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. I looked at his shaking shoulders. I remembered teaching him how to fish. I remembered him catching his first base and looking at me with pure hero worship. How had we come to this? "It is okay, son," I said softly. "I know Meredith. She is a master of fear." "She is a monster," Kendrick cried, looking up. His face was wet with tears. "I hate her, Dad. I hate what she is doing to you. She is evil, isn't she? Tell me you hate her too, Dad. Tell me what you really think of her." He leaned forward across the table, his eyes intense. "Say it, Dad. Say she is a thief. Say she deserves to rot in jail. I need to hear you say it so I know I am not crazy." I looked at him. Something about his intensity felt off. He was pushing too hard. He was begging for a specific reaction. But I was tired, and I was full of warm food, and I wanted to comfort my son. I stood up and walked over to him. "Stand up, Kendrick," I said. He stood up. I opened my arms. He fell into me, hugging me tight. He buried his face in my shoulder, sobbing. I wrapped my arms around his back, holding him close, trying to transfer some of my strength into his weak spine. "I love you, son," I whispered. "We will get through this." I pressed him closer. My hand moved up his back, patting him reassuringly. Then my hand moved down to his lower back under his jacket. And then I felt it. It was a hard, square lump taped to his skin right above his belt line. It was small, about the size of a deck of cards. I felt a thin wire running up from it, taped along his spine. I froze. The world stopped spinning. The warmth of the chicken in my stomach turned into ice. The love I felt for him in that moment died a violent, instant death. It was not a medical device. Kendrick was healthy. It was a recording device. He was wearing a wire. Everything became crystal clear in a split second. The tears, the food, the leading questions. Tell me you hate her, Dad. Say she is a thief. He was not here to feed me. He was here to hunt me. The court order was specific. If I disparaged the conservators, if I showed aggression or made threats against Meredith or Terrence, I would be in violation of the order. They could revoke my allowance. They could evict me. They could throw me in a psychiatric ward for being a danger to others. Kendrick was trying to get me on tape threatening Meredith. He was trying to get me to break the law so they could lock me away forever. He was hugging me with one arm and holding a knife to my throat with the other. The pain was worse than the physical pain in my hip. It was worse than this grief of losing Corinne. This was the ultimate betrayal. My own flesh and blood, my baby boy was Judas. I did not pull away. I did not scream. I did not strangle him, though every fiber of my being wanted to. Instead, I held him tighter. I felt him stiffen. He realized that I had found the box. He stopped crying instantly. His breathing stopped. He tried to pull back, but I did not let him go. I was stronger than him. I had worked manual labor my whole life. He was soft. I clamped my arms around him like a vice. "Dad," he stammered. "Dad, let go." I leaned my head down. I put my lips right next to his ear, the ear I used to whisper bedtime stories into. "Is it recording, Kendrick?" I whispered. My voice was calm, dead calm. "Dad, please," he squeaked. "Good," I said. "I want it to record this." I took a breath. I smelled his expensive cologne mixed with the fierce sweat that was now pouring off him. "I know about 2018, Kendrick." He froze completely. He went rigid in my arms. "I know about the rainy night in November," I whispered. "I know about the girl on 5th Street, the one on the bicycle. I know you were drunk. I know you hit her and kept driving." Kendrick started to shake, but this time it was not fake. "Dad, stop!" He pleaded, his voice a high-pitched whine. "Mom protected you," I continued. "She paid the witnesses. She bought the silence of the police captain. She spent $500,000 to keep you out of prison because she loved you. She thought you made a mistake." I tightened my grip. "But she kept the file, Kendrick. She kept the bloody headlight fragment you buried in the backyard. She kept the original police report before it was redacted. She kept it all in the Shadow Trust." "No," Kendrick gasped. "That is a lie. Mom burned it. She told me she burned it." "She lied to you," I whispered, "because she knew one day you would turn on us." And she was right. I pulled back just an inch so I could look him in the eyes. His eyes were wide with terror. He looked like a trapped animal. "That recording device you are wearing," I said. "It is transmitting to Meredith, isn't it? She is listening right now." Kendrick nodded slowly, unable to speak. "Good," I said. I leaned in toward the hidden microphone on his chest. I spoke clearly, loudly enough for Meredith to hear wherever she was hiding. "Hello, Meredith. I know you are listening. You sent him here to get dirt on me. Well, here is some dirt. The hit and run file is in the hands of my lawyer. If I am committed to an institution, if I am harmed, or if I die, that file goes to the district attorney automatically. It is a dead man switch." I looked back at Kendrick. "You are not going to jail for fraud, son. You are going to jail for vehicular manslaughter. There is no statute of limitations on murder when the victim dies in the hospital 3 days later." Kendrick pushed me away. He stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. He looked at me with pure horror. "You wouldn't," he stammered. "I am your son." I looked at him standing there with his wire and his fake tears. I looked at the man who had just tried to trick his father into a mental asylum. "I don't have any sons," I said. "My sons died when my wife died. I only see a stranger in my kitchen. And strangers who break the law go to prison." Kendrick backed away toward the door. He was hyperventilating. "You are crazy," he yelled. "You are a crazy old man." "Run," I said. And he did. He turned and ran out of the hallway. I heard the front door slam. I heard his car tires screech as he peeled out of the driveway. I stood alone in the kitchen. The candle flickered. The fried chicken was cold. I reached under my shirt and touched the spot where my heart used to be. It was gone. They had taken everything now. My money, my home, my family. But they had made a fatal mistake. A man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man in the world. I blew out the candle. The darkness returned, but I was not afraid of it anymore. I was part of it. I sat down and finished the chicken. I needed the strength. Tomorrow the real war would begin. The rain was coming down hard. It was a cold, relentless rain that washed the grime off the city streets, but could not wash away the stain of betrayal on my family name. I sat in the passenger seat of Javier's van, watching the wiper blades slap back and forth. We were parked across the street from the old distribution warehouse. This was the beating heart of the company Corinne and I had built. It was where we stored the lumber, the steel, the bricks. Now it was a fortress guarded by the same private security firm that had thrown me out of the office building. "Ready?" Mr. Jefferson Javier asked. He was dressed in black, holding a pair of heavy bolt cutters. I looked at the chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I looked at the security cameras sweeping the perimeter. I was 68 years old. I had arthritis in my hip. I was a church deacon. And tonight I was about to commit a felony. "I am ready," I said. We moved through the shadows. The rain helped mask our sound. We approached the blind spot in the fence line, a spot I knew about because I had designed the layout 20 years ago. Javier worked the bolt cutters. The metal snapped with a dull thud. We pulled the fencing back just enough to squeeze through. I was inside, but the danger was just beginning. We had to cross the loading dock to get to the maintenance bay. That was where Corinne had hidden the box. According to Caldwell, she had buried it under the concrete slab beneath the hydraulic lift in Bay 4. It was the only place in the warehouse that never got renovated because the lift was too heavy to move. We crept along the wall. I heard footsteps, heavy boots on wet pavement. "Get down," Javier whispered, pushing me behind a stack of pallets. A guard walked by. He was shining a flashlight, swinging the beam back and forth. The light passed inches from my face. I held my breath. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. If we got caught now, it was over. The violation of the court order, the trespassing. They would lock me up and throw away the key. The guard stopped. He lit a cigarette. The smoke drifted toward us. I closed my eyes, praying to the Lord for silence. I thought about Terrence. Was he sleeping soundly in his mansion while his father hid in the mud like a criminal? The anger flared up inside me, hot and sharp, giving me the adrenaline I needed to stay still. The guard finished his smoke and moved on. "Move," Javier signaled. We dashed across the open concrete of the loading dock. I ignored the pain in my leg. We reached the side door of Bay 4. It was locked. Javier pulled out a set of master keys. Not the electronic ones Meredith had deactivated, but the old brass keys, the ones Corinne had kept in her safe deposit box. The lock clicked. We slipped inside. The warehouse was dark and smelled of oil and sawdust. It was the smell of my life. I walked to the hydraulic lift in the center of the room. It stood there like a sleeping giant. "Here," Javier said, pointing to a loose section of concrete floorboard near the control panel. He used a crowbar to pry it up. It groaned, protesting the intrusion. Underneath was dirt, hard-packed earth. Javier handed me a shovel. We took turns digging. The sound of metal hitting dirt was too loud in the empty space. Every scrape sounded like a siren. Clank. We hit something. Javier reached down into the hole. He pulled out a metal lockbox. It was rusted on the outside but sealed tight. "We did it," Javier breathed. But we were not safe yet. We heard a door open on the other side of the warehouse. Voices. 2 guards this time. "Did you hear that one of them asked?" "Sounded like digging." "Check Bay 4, the other said. We were trapped. There was no way out the back without crossing their line of sight. Up, Javier pointed. The catwalk. We scrambled up the metal ladder. My hip screamed in protest, but fear is a powerful painkiller. We laid flat on the steel grate of the catwalk high above the floor just as the flashlight beam swept the room. The guards walked right up to the lift. They looked at the hole we had dug. Rats, maybe one guard said, kicking a piece of concrete. Or the foundation is finally giving way. This place is a dump. Let us write it up and get back to the office, the other said. It is freezing in here. They left. I let out a breath I had been holding for 5 minutes. I clutched the cold metal box against my chest. I had broken into my own life to steal back my own truth. And I had succeeded. We waited another 10 minutes before climbing down and sneaking back out into the rain. We drove 3 blocks away before Javier finally pulled over under a broken streetlight. "Open it," he said. I pulled a small key from my pocket. Caldwell had given it to me along with the instructions. I unlocked the box. Inside, there were no bank statements. There were no deeds. There was a thick manila envelope labeled Private Investigator. I opened it. I pulled out a stack of photographs. My hands started to shake. The photos were of Meredith, but she was not at a board meeting. She was at a hotel. And she was not with Terrence. She was with a man. A white man. I recognized him. He was the loan officer from the bank. The one who had approved the fraudulent $2 million loan. I flipped through the photos. They were intimate, undeniable. Meredith kissing him. Meredith laughing with him at a seaside resort. Meredith handing him a briefcase. But that was not the worst part. Under the photos was a stack of printed emails. They were between Meredith and the banker. I read the top one. It was dated 2 months ago. Subject: the idiot. I read the text. "Don't worry about Terrence. He will sign whatever I put in front of him. He is desperate to prove to his daddy that he is a big businessman. Once the loan is approved and the funds are moved to the offshore account, I will file for divorce. I will get half of everything plus the hidden funds. We will leave him with the debt and the dying mother. The idiot has no idea." I felt sick. I opened the door of the van and dry heaved onto the pavement. Meredith was not just stealing the company, she was destroying my son. She was setting him up to take the fall for the fraud while she walked away with the lover and the money. Terrence was not the mastermind. He was the patsy. He was the fool. Javier picked up the papers. He read them, his face hardening into stone. "This is it, Mr. Jefferson," he said. "This is the kill shot. We give this to the police. We give this to the judge. Meredith goes to jail for fraud and conspiracy, and Terrence goes down with her." I looked at him. Terrence. "Yes, Terrence signed the papers," Javier said. "He is complicit, but this proves he was manipulated. It might not save him from jail, but it destroys them both. We have them." I looked at the photograph of my son. He looked so proud in his suit standing next to Meredith. He thought he was a king, but he was just a pawn. I remembered holding him when he was a baby. I remembered the night he had a fever and I stayed up rocking him until dawn. I remembered him looking at me with those big, trusting eyes. He had betrayed me. He had pushed me down. He had called me crazy, but he was my son, and he was about to be slaughtered by the woman he loved. "I have to tell him," I whispered. Javier looked at me like I was insane. "Tell him. Mr. Jefferson, he tried to commit you to an asylum. He is wearing a wire right now, probably waiting for you to slip up. If you go to him, he will hand you over to the police." I said. "I know he is lost. But if I use this evidence now without warning him, I am no better than they are. I am a father, Javier. A father does not let his son walk off a cliff if he can stop it, even a prodigal son. But he won't believe you," Javier argued. "He is brainwashed." "Maybe," I said. "But I have to try. I have to give him one last chance to choose blood over money, to choose truth over lies." I took the burner phone Javier had bought for me. I looked at the keypad. My thumb hovered over the numbers. This was the most dangerous thing I had ever done, more dangerous than breaking into the warehouse. I was about to walk into the lion den with a piece of meat and hope the lion remembered he used to be a cub. I typed the number, I typed the message. "Meet me at the diner on 4th, alone. I know about the banker, I know about the divorce plan. If you want to save yourself, come now." I hit send. I looked at Javier. "Drive," I said. "Where to?" Javier asked. "To the diner," I said. "I am going to buy my son a cup of coffee, and then I am going to either save his life or watch him destroy it." The bell above the door at Joe's diner chimed with a sound that used to mean happiness. For 20 years, this was the place where Corinne and I brought the boys on Saturday mornings. It smelled of burnt coffee, bacon grease, and lemon floor cleaner. It smelled like the America we had built with our own hands. But today, sitting in the cracked red vinyl booth that smelled of stale smoke and old memories, I felt like a ghost haunting a graveyard. I checked my watch. Terrence was 20 minutes late. That was his power move now. Meredith had taught him that. Keep them waiting. Make them feel small. Make them understand that your time is worth more than their dignity. I looked out the window. A sleek, silver sports car pulled up to the curb, illegally parking in the loading zone. It looked like a spaceship landed in a cornfield. It was out of place. It was aggressive. It was Terrence. He stepped out of the car. He was wearing a suit that cost more than the annual salary of the waitress pouring coffee behind the counter. He adjusted his silk tie, checked his reflection in the window, and walked in. He did not look at the other customers. He looked through them. To him, the working-class people eating their eggs were just background noise. They were props in the movie of his life. He saw me in the back booth. He did not smile. He did not wave. He walked over with a strut that was not his own. It was a walk he had copied from Meredith, a walk that said, "I own the room." He slid into the booth opposite me. He did not take off his sunglasses. "You have 5 minutes, Walter," he said. "I have a lunch meeting with the zoning board." He called me Walter. Not Dad, not Pop. Walter. I signaled the waitress. It was Sarah. She had known Terrence since he was in diapers. She smiled at him holding the coffee pot. "Hi there, Terry," she said. "Long time no see. You want the usual?" "Blueberry pancakes." Terrence looked at her like she was a bug on his windshield. "I want sparkling water," he said, cold and sharp. "And do not call me Terry. My name is Mr. Jefferson." Sarah's smile died. She looked at me confused and hurt. I nodded an apology to her. She walked away. Her shoulders slumped. I looked at my son. "Is that how you talk to people now?" I asked. "To people who fed you when you were a child." Terrence sighed dramatically, removing his sunglasses. "Save the lecture, Walter. You said this was life or death. I assumed it was about your health. But you look fine. Old and tired, but fine. So what is it? Do you need more money? Did the $500 run out already?" I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the envelope containing the photos and the emails Javier and I had stolen from the warehouse. I placed it on the table between us. It sat there like a loaded gun. "I am not here for money," I said. "I am here to save you. Save me." Terrence laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "From what? From success? From wealth? From living the life you were too afraid to live?" "From the snake in your bed," I said. I pushed the envelope toward him. "Open it, Terrence. Read it." He looked at the envelope with disdain. He did not touch it. "What is this?" More paranoid scribblings. "Did you find a secret map in your cereal box this morning?" "It is proof," I said, my voice low and intensity vibrating in every word. "It is proof that Meredith is having an affair with the loan officer. It is proof that she plans to divorce you the moment the fraud is complete. She calls you an idiot in her own words, Terrence. She is setting you up to take the fall." Terrence stared at me. For a second, just a fraction of a second, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He reached out. His hand hovered over the envelope. "Open it," I urged him. "Just look at the pictures." He touched the paper. Then he stopped. He looked up at me and his face hardened. The mask slammed back into place. "No," he said. He grabbed the envelope. He did not open it. He did not look inside. He ripped it in half. Then he ripped it again. He threw the pieces onto the table. The torn face of his wife kissing another man lay there ignored. "I am not playing your game, Walter," he hissed. "Meredith warned me about this. She told me you would try to drive a wedge between us. She told me you were jealous." "Jealous?" I asked, stunned. "Of what?" "Of us," Terrence said, his voice rising. "Of our power. You and Mom ran a small-time operation. You were satisfied with small profits and community awards. Meredith and I are building an empire, and you cannot stand it. You cannot stand that a white woman is smarter than you. You cannot stand that your son is more successful than you." He stood up. He was shouting now. The whole diner was watching. "You hired some cheap Photoshop artist to make fake pictures," Terrence yelled, pointing a finger at me. "You are pathetic. You are a sad, lonely old man who would rather destroy his son's marriage than admit he is obsolete." "Sit down, Terrence," I said. My voice was quiet, but my hands were shaking under the table. "You are wrong. I love you. I am trying to keep you out of prison." "I don't need your love," Terrence spat. "And I am not going to prison. I am going to the penthouse." He leaned down, placing his hands on the table, getting right in my face. "You want to know the truth, Walter. You want to know what I really think." I looked into his eyes. I searched for my boy. I searched for the child who used to cry when he stepped on a bug. He was gone. "Tell me," I said. Mom dying was the best thing that could have happened to this company, Terrence whispered. The world went silent. The clatter of dishes stopped. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. "What did you say?" I asked. I said it was a relief. He continued, his voice full of venom. "She was an anchor, Walter. She was holding us back with her ethics and her charity and her fear. When she died, it was like the chains were cut. We are free now. Her death was a business strategy, and it paid off. So stop mourning her and start thanking her for getting out of the way." I sat there frozen. The words hit me like physical blows. They tore through my chest and shattered whatever hope I had left. He had not just insulted me, he had desecrated the memory of the woman who gave him life. He had spit on her grave. I looked at the torn pieces of the envelope. I looked at the coffee stains on the table. I realized then that my son was dead. The man standing in front of me was a stranger with my last name and my eyes, but with a soul that had been eaten by greed. There was nothing left to save. I slowly pulled my wallet from my pocket. I took out a $10 bill and placed it on the table next to the torn photos. "Goodbye, Terrence," I said. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply stood up. "Walter, sit down. I am not finished with you," Terrence yelled. "I want you to sign a statement retracting these lies." I walked past him. I did not look at him. He grabbed my arm. "Did you hear me, old man?" he shouted. I stopped. I looked down at his hand on my arm, the hand that had signed the fraudulent papers, the hand that had pushed me down. "Let go," I said. Something in my voice made him flinch. It was not anger. It was the absolute finality of a door closing forever. He let go. I walked to the door. Sarah, the waitress, was standing there, tears in her eyes. "I am sorry, Sarah," I said softly. "Keep the change." I walked out into the cool air. The rain had stopped. The sky was gray and heavy like a slab of slate. The silver sports car was still there, gleaming in the dull light. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. It tasted like resolution. I was no longer a father. I was no longer a husband protecting a memory. I was an instrument of justice. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. My thumb did not hesitate this time. I dialed Evelyn Caldwell's number. She answered on the first ring. "Walter," she said. "Did he listen?" "No," I said. My voice was steady, flat, emotionless. "He is gone, Evelyn. He is one of them." There was a pause on the line. "I am sorry, Walter," she said. "Don't be," I said. "We gave him a chance. He chose his side. Now I am choosing mine." I looked back at the diner through the window. Terrence was on his phone, probably calling Meredith to brag about how he had put the old man in his place. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was about to open up. "Evelyn," I said, "activate the Phoenix protocol." "Are you sure?" she asked. "Once we start, there is no going back. The company will be gutted. The assets will be frozen. They will be arrested within the hour. It will be a massacre." I looked at the sky. I thought of Corinne. I thought of the peaceful expression on her face in the casket. I thought of the promise I made to her. "Kill them all," I said. "Burn it down. Burn it all down to the ground." I hung up the phone and threw it into the trash can. I buttoned my coat and started walking. I had a funeral to arrange, not for my wife, but for the empire of lies my family had built. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with humidity and the smell of expensive cologne. I stood at the edge of the construction site watching the circus my family had pitched on the grave of my wife's legacy. They had erected a massive white tent in the center of the lot, right over the spot where Javier and I had dug up the evidence the night before. Inside the tent, crystal chandeliers hung from the canvas ceiling. A jazz band was playing soft, inoffensive music. Waiters in white tuxedos drifted through the crowd offering flutes of champagne to the city elite. It was the groundbreaking ceremony for the Jefferson Heights luxury condominiums. That was the name Meredith had chosen. She had slapped our family name on a project that stood for everything Corinne despised. Corinne believed in affordable housing. She believed in community. This project was a glass tower for the rich built to push the poor out of the neighborhood. I watched Meredith holding court in the center of the room. She was wearing a red dress that looked like a wound against the white backdrop. She was laughing, throwing her head back, holding onto the arm of the mayor. She looked radiant. She looked victorious. She looked like a woman who had gotten away with murder. Next to her stood Terrence, my son. He He was holding a golden shovel, the prop they would use for the photo op. He looked the part of the successful CEO. He was shaking hands, clapping men on the back, acting like he had built this empire himself. But I could see the tension in his shoulders. I could see the way his eyes darted around the room. He was terrified. He knew what he had done to his father in that diner. He knew he had crossed a line from which there was no return. But he also thought he was safe. He thought the old man was defeated at home crying over a burner phone. He had no idea that the old man was standing 20 feet away in the shadows adjusting his tie. I was wearing my best suit. It was 10 years old, a charcoal gray wool suit Corinne had bought me for our anniversary. It was a little loose now since I had lost weight from the stress and the hunger, but I had pressed it myself that morning. My shirt was crisp and white. My shoes were polished until they shone like black mirrors. I did not look like a crazy person. I did not look like a victim. I looked like the founder of a dynasty coming to inspect his kingdom. I checked my pocket. The single bullet Corinne had left me, the metaphorical bullet, was ready. I signaled to Javier, who was standing behind me. He was not alone. Behind him stood 12 men. They were not young men. They were gray-haired with weathered faces and calloused hands. They were the veterans from the local VFW hall, the men Corinne had supported for decades. They were the men my company had hired when no one else would give them a chance. They were wearing their old service caps and their Sunday best. They were my army. "Let us go," I said. We walked out of the shadows and onto the red carpet. The security at the entrance was tighter than the night I was thrown out of the office. These were not rent-a-cops. These were off-duty police officers hired by Meredith to ensure no riffraff disturbed her moment of glory. One of the officers stepped forward, raising a hand to stop me. "Sir, this is a private event," he said, his eyes scanning my old suit and the group of grim-faced men behind me. "I need to see your invitation." "I do not need an invitation," I said, my voice calm and projecting over the music. "I am Walter Jefferson." The officer hesitated. He knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. But he also had his orders. "Mr. Jefferson," he said, looking uncomfortable, "I have been given strict instructions. You are not on the list. In fact, I have been told to remove you if you appear. Please turn around, sir." "I do not want to cause a scene." "I am not turning around," I said. I took a step forward. The officer reached for his belt, not for a gun, but for his radio. "We have a situation at the main entrance," he spoke into his lapel. 2 more guards appeared flanking him. They moved to block my path. They were big men used to intimidation. "Back up," one of them growled. "Now!" Before I could move, Javier stepped in front of me. He did not say a word. He just stood there, a block of granite in work boots. Then the 12 veterans moved. They did not attack. They simply flowed around the guards, forming a protective circle around me. They were disciplined. They moved with the coordination of men who had walked through fire together. One of the veterans, a man named Marcus, who had lost an eye in Desert Storm, looked at the young police officer. "Son," Marcus said, his voice like gravel, "I fought for this country before you were born. If you want to put your hands on Mr. Jefferson, you have to go through 12 United States Marines. Do you really want that headline tomorrow morning?" The officer froze. He looked at the veterans standing tall and proud. He looked at the press photographers nearby who were starting to turn their cameras toward the commotion. He knew that arresting a group of elderly war heroes at a luxury gala was a public relations nightmare. He stepped aside. "Thank you," I said. I walked past him. My phalanx of old soldiers marched with me. We entered the tent. The transition was instant. One moment there was the murmur of polite conversation and the clinking of glasses. The next moment there was silence. It started near the entrance and rippled through the room like a wave. People stopped drinking. The band stopped playing. All eyes turned to us. We walked down the center aisle. I did not look left or right. I kept my eyes fixed on the stage. Meredith saw me. Her smile vanished. Her glass of champagne tilted in her hand, spilling a little onto the floor. She whispered something frantically to Terrence. Terrence looked up and his face went pale. He dropped the golden shovel. It clattered loudly on the wooden stage, amplifying the silence. Walter Meredith hissed as I approached the stairs to the stage. She hurried to the edge of the platform, her face twisted in a rictus of fake concern. "Dad, what are you doing here? You are not well. You should be resting." She motioned to her private security detail, the big men in black suits who were standing by the speakers. "Escort him out," she ordered them, her voice rising in panic. "He is having an episode. Get him out of here before he hurts himself." The bodyguards moved toward me, but my veterans were faster. They lined up at the bottom of the stairs, blocking the path of the bodyguards. They stood shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed. It was a standoff. I walked up the stairs. My hip ached, but I did not limp. I walked with the ghost of Corinne beside me. Meredith tried to block my way to the microphone. "Don't do this, Walter," she whispered, venom dripping from every word. "If you say one word, I will have you committed tonight. I will ruin you." I looked at her. I looked at the fear behind her rage. "You already ruined me, Meredith," I said softly. "You burned my house. You stole my son. You took my money. What else is there to take?" I walked past her. She grabbed my arm, digging her nails in. "Security," she screamed, losing all composure. "Get this crazy old man off the stage." I pulled my arm free. I stepped up to the podium. I gripped the sides of the lectern. It felt solid. It felt like a pulpit. I looked out at the sea of faces, the mayor, the bankers, the investors, the press. They were all watching, waiting to see what the crazy old man would do. I leaned into the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, steady and deep. Terrence rushed toward me from the other side of the stage. "Dad, please don't. Just come down. We can talk about this." I ignored him. I ignored Meredith, who was now screaming at the police officers to do something. "I am sorry to interrupt your celebration," I continued. "I know the champagne is expensive and the music is sweet, but there has been a mistake, a very expensive mistake." The crowd murmured. The cameras were flashing blindingly. "You are all here to celebrate the groundbreaking of Jefferson Heights," I said. "You have invested millions. You have bought into a vision of the future. My daughter-in-law and my son have promised you that this land is the foundation of a new empire." I paused. I looked at Terrence. He was standing frozen, staring at me with the eyes of a child who knows the punishment is coming. "But there is one small problem," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the document Evelyn Caldwell had given me. It was not the recording. It was not the photos of the affair. It was a simple property deed. "This land," I said, holding the paper up, "does not belong to the Jefferson Corporation." Meredith lunged for the microphone. "Cut the sound," she screamed at the sound engineer. "Cut it now." The sound engineer, confused and terrified, looked from her to me. He did not cut the sound. "This land," I said, my voice rising over her screams, "was sold 10 years ago. My wife, Corinne Jefferson, sold it for $1. I looked at the investors in the front row. I saw the blood drain from their faces. "She sold it to a blind trust," I said. "A trust designed to activate only when her family lost its way." Meredith was clawing at my back now, trying to drag me away from the podium. Javier appeared on stage, pulling her off me with one effortless motion. He held her back firmly. "Let me go," she shrieked. "He is lying. He is senile." I straightened my tie. I looked directly into the camera lens of the local news station. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ground Zero. But you are not standing on private property. You are standing on land owned by the J&C Trust." I pointed to the massive LED screen behind me, which had been displaying the artist rendering of the luxury condos. "Now," I said. Javier spoke into his headset. The image on the screen flickered. The luxury towers vanished. The logo of the Jefferson Corporation vanished. In its place, a new image appeared. It was a logo none of them had ever seen before. Simple, stark, high contrast. It was the logo of the J&C Trust. And underneath the logo were words that made the bankers drop their glasses and made Meredith fall to her knees. Beneath the logo it read, "Property of the Veteran Housing Coalition." I looked at the crowd. "Get off my land," I said. The silence in the tent was absolute. The jazz band had stopped playing. The waiters had stopped serving. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. The only light came from the massive LED screen behind me, which was no longer displaying the artist rendering of Meredith's luxury high-rise. Instead, it burned with the stark black and white logo of the J&C Trust. Underneath it, the words, "Property of the Veteran Housing Coalition," glowed like a neon judgment. Meredith stood frozen on the stage. Her face was a mask of confusion that was rapidly cracking into terror. She looked at the screen, then she looked at me. For the first time since my wife died, I saw something new in her eyes. I saw the realization that she was not the smartest person in the room. "That is a lie," she screamed. Her voice cracked, breaking the silence. "This is a trick. Security turned that screen off. It is a hack." She ran toward the sound engineer booth, waving her arms like a drowning woman, but then a voice cut through her panic. It was a voice calm and sharp as a scalpel. "It is not a hack, Meredith. It is the law." Evelyn Caldwell stepped out from the shadows behind the stage curtains. She was holding a leather portfolio. She walked to the center of the stage, her heels clicking a steady rhythm on the wood. She did not look at Meredith. She looked at the crowd of investors and bankers. "My name is Evelyn Caldwell," she announced. "I am the executor of the estate of Corinne Jefferson, and I am here to correct a significant error in tonight's proceedings." Terrence stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" "We are in the middle of a ceremony." Evelyn opened her portfolio. She pulled out a yellowed document encased in a protective plastic sleeve. She held it up to the light. "You are celebrating a groundbreaking," she said, "but you cannot break ground on land you do not own." She turned to the crowd, projecting her voice without a microphone. 10 years ago, Corinne Jefferson grew concerned about the direction her company might take in the future. She wanted to ensure that this specific plot of land, the heart of her community work, would never be turned into a playground for the wealthy. So she sold it. "Sold it," Meredith yelled. "To whom?" "We checked the records." "The title is in the company name." "You checked the public digital records," Evelyn replied coolly. "You did not check the physical archives in the county basement. Corinne filed a title transfer 10 years ago. She sold this entire city block, including the warehouse and the office building." Evelyn paused, letting the tension build. "She sold it for the sum of $1. A gasp went through the crowd. $1. She sold it to the J&C Trust. Evelyn continued. "A blind trust established to benefit the local Veteran Housing Coalition. And the beneficiaries of that trust are the men standing right there." She pointed to the group of 12 veterans standing guard around me. Javier took a step forward, his face stoic. "But wait," Terrence stammered. "If the trust owns the land, then what have we been doing here? We have offices here. We have been operating here for years." Evelyn smiled a thin, dangerous smile. "You have been tenants, Terrence." Corinne signed a 99-year lease back to her own company to use the facilities. It was a standard commercial lease. However, there was a termination clause. She pulled out another piece of paper. "The lease automatically terminates upon the death of Corinne Jefferson or upon any attempt to use the land for purposes other than commercial logistics. Furthermore, the lease had a standard renewal date. That date was last Tuesday. Since no renewal was filed by the legitimate landowner, the lease has expired." She looked at Meredith. "You are trespassing, Meredith. You are throwing a party in someone else's house, and the landlord wants you out." The room exploded into noise. The investors who had put millions into the project started shouting. People were pulling out their phones, calling their lawyers. The press photographers were going wild, their flashes lighting up the stage like a lightning storm. Meredith's face went white. She grabbed Terrence by the lapels of his jacket. "Tell them she is lying," she shrieked. "Fix this, Terrence. We have the loan. The bank approved the collateral." "And that is the problem, isn't it?" I spoke into the microphone again. I looked down at the front row. Sitting there, clutching a glass of warm champagne, was Mr. Henderson, the vice president of the bank, the man Meredith was sleeping with, the man who had approved the $2 million loan based on the value of this land. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "I believe you have a problem." Henderson stood up. He was sweating profusely. He looked at the screen, then at Meredith. He realized in that second that his career was over. He realized he had approved a loan secured by an asset the borrower did not own. "Meredith," he shouted, his voice trembling, "is this true? Does the company own the land or not?" Meredith turned to him, desperate. "It is a mistake, Arthur. It is just paperwork. We can fix it." "It is not paperwork," Henderson yelled. "It is fraud." He pulled his phone out and dialed a number. His hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the device. "I am calling the risk management department," he announced to the room. "I am declaring the loan in default immediately. The collateral is invalid. The funds are frozen." The dominoes started to fall. Another man in a gray suit stood up. He was the lead investor for the condo project. "If the bank is pulling out, then so am I," he shouted. "I want my deposit back. This is a scam." "Me too," another woman yelled. "You told us you owned the site free and clear." The crowd surged toward the stage. It was not a polite crowd anymore. It was a mob of angry rich people who had been duped. They were shouting, demanding answers, demanding their money. Meredith backed away from the edge of the stage. She looked trapped. Her empire of lies was crumbling in real time. She looked at Terrence. "Do something," she screamed at him. "You are the CEO. Handle them. Terrence looked at the angry mob. He looked at Mr. Henderson, who was screaming into his phone about a $2 million loss. He looked at me. We don't own it, he whispered. His voice was broken. We don't own any of it. No, son, I said, stepping closer to him. You don't. You built a castle on sand, and the tide just came in. The chaos in the tent was deafening, but through the noise I heard the sound of sirens, real sirens this time, not the private security alarms, but the heavy wail of police cruisers. Blue and red lights flashed against the canvas walls of the tent. The entrance flaps flew open. A team of officers marched in. They were not wearing the standard patrol uniforms. They were wearing blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. Economic Crimes Unit. Meredith saw them. Her eyes lit up with a sudden desperate hope. She thought her influence still held sway. She thought she could twist this one last time. Over here, she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. Arrest him. He is disrupting a corporate event. He is trespassing. He is mentally unstable. She ran toward the lead detective, a stern woman with short hair and a no-nonsense expression. Officer, thank God you are here, Meredith panted, trying to compose herself. That man on the stage, Walter Jefferson, he is dangerous. He has caused a riot. I want him removed. The detective looked at Meredith. She looked at the red dress. She looked at the desperate sweat running down Meredith's face. Are you Meredith Jefferson? The detective asked. Yes, Meredith said, drawing herself up. I am the acting CEO, and I demand you arrest that man. The detective did not look at me. She reached for her belt. Meredith Jefferson, the detective, said, her voice loud and clear. I have a warrant for your arrest. Meredith froze. What? And for you too, sir, the detective said, pointing at Terrence, who was trying to hide behind a speaker stack. Terrence Jefferson, step forward. Arrest me. Meredith laughed a high-pitched, hysterical sound. You are making a mistake. I am the victim here. You are under arrest for mortgage fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny, the detective recited. We have received evidence from the bank regarding a fraudulent loan application, and we have evidence that you knowingly used assets you did not own as collateral. Two officers moved in. They grabbed Meredith's arms. She fought them. Get your hands off me, she screamed. Do you know who I am? Arthur, tell them. She looked at Mr. Henderson. But the banker turned his back on her, terrified of being associated with her now. Terrence did not fight. When the officer approached him, he just slumped his shoulders. He looked at me. His eyes were dead. Dad, he whispered. Help me. I stood on the stage looking down at them. My wife-old office building loomed behind us, solid and true. The land beneath my feet felt firm. I watched the handcuffs click onto Meredith's wrists. The cold steel locked tight against her skin. She was still screaming, blaming everyone, blaming the bank, blaming Terrence, blaming me. She had no dignity left. I watched the handcuffs go onto Terrence's wrists. He looked small. He looked like a boy playing dress-up in his father's suit. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The gala had turned into a crime scene. The detective looked up at me. Mr. Jefferson, she said, we will need a statement from you later. I nodded. I will be there. The officers began to lead Meredith and Terrence away. The flashbulbs popped like fireworks, capturing their shame for the morning papers. Meredith twisted around, trying to look at me one last time. You think you won, Walter, she spat. You just destroyed your own family. You have nothing left. You are just a sad old man with a pile of dirt. I looked at her. I looked at the handcuffs. I looked at the ruined party. I leaned into the microphone one last time. Wait, I said. The officers stopped. Meredith looked at me, thinking I might show mercy, thinking I might recant. I am not done yet, I said. The room went quiet again. Meredith, you said I have nothing left. I said, but you are wrong. I have one thing left. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the USB drive, the one from the secret room, the one with the video from her bedroom. You are going to jail for fraud, I said, but that is just business. That is just numbers. I looked at Terrence. But what you did to this family, what you did to my wife, that is personal. I signaled to the sound engineer. He was terrified now, ready to do anything I asked. I held up the drive. Play it, I said. Meredith's eyes went wide with a new kind of terror. Not the fear of jail, but the fear of total annihilation. "No," she whispered. "No, please. Not yet," I said to the crowd. "Don't leave yet. There is one more gift." I looked at my son. "You asked for the truth, Terrence," I said. "You asked why I hated her." "Well, watch the screen." I handed the drive to Javier, who plugged it into the console. The logo of the trust faded from the screen, and the video player appeared. The hook was set, the trap was sprung, and the final blow was about to fall. The screen behind me flickered once more. The logo of the trust vanished and was replaced by a time-stamped video file. It was grainy footage taken from a hidden camera Corinne had installed in the master bedroom of our lake house. She had installed it years ago after a break-in, but nobody knew it was there except her and me. The crowd watched in hushed silence. On the giant LED screen, the image resolved. It showed a bedroom, Corinne's bedroom. But Corinne was not in the room. Meredith was there, and she was not alone. Sitting on the edge of the bed wearing a silk robe that belonged to my wife was Meredith. Standing next to her, pouring 2 glasses of wine, was Arthur Henderson, the banker who had just tried to flee the tent. The audio was crystal clear. "To the idiot husband," Henderson said on the screen, raising his glass. "To the idiot," Meredith replied, clinking her glass against his. "And to the old witch," finally kicking the bucket. A collective gasp went through the audience. Terrence stood on the stage, his mouth hanging open. He looked from the screen to the real Arthur Henderson, who was now being detained by 2 officers near the exit. The betrayal was absolute. The man he thought was his business partner was sleeping with his wife in his mother's bed. But the video was not done. Meredith sat back on the bed, laughing. "You know, Arthur, I was worried for a minute." Corinne was getting stronger last week. She was actually sitting up and asking for her ledger. Henderson frowned on the screen. "That is dangerous. If she checks the books before we get the loan approved, we are dead." "Don't worry," Meredith said. She took a sip of wine. Her voice on the recording was casual, chillingly casual. "I fixed it. I swapped her heart medication for the old, expired beta blockers she had in the cabinet. And I doubled the dose of her sedative. She won't be checking any books. She will be lucky if she wakes up at all." The silence in the tent shattered. It was not a murmur this time. It was a roar of horror. On the stage, Terrence fell to his knees. It was not a figure of speech. His legs simply gave out. He collapsed onto the wooden planks, staring up at the giant image of his wife confessing to poisoning his mother. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. His face was gray. His eyes were wide and vacant. He was watching the murder of his mother and the death of his marriage play out in high definition. I looked at Meredith. She was no longer screaming. She was staring at the screen, her hands covering her mouth. For the first time, she realized that there was no way out. This was not financial fraud. This was not a white-collar crime. This was attempted murder. This was evil. The video ended. The screen went black. I stepped back to the microphone. "You wanted the truth, Terrence," I said, my voice echoing over the stunned crowd. "There it is. She did not just steal your money. She stole your mother's life, and she laughed about it while drinking wine in her bed." Terrence looked up at me. Tears were streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat of his fear. He looked at Meredith. He did not look at her with love anymore. He looked at her with the raw, unfiltered hatred of a man who realizes he has been sleeping with a monster. "You killed her," Terrence whispered. His voice was broken, a jagged shard of sound. "You killed my mom." Meredith backed away, shaking her head frantically. "No, Terrence, baby, listen to me. It was just talk. I was just trying to impress Arthur. I did not mean it." But the police detective did not care about her excuses. She had heard enough. She signaled to her team. The officers moved in with a speed and aggression that made the crowd flinch. They did not treat Meredith like a CEO anymore. They treated her like a violent criminal. Meredith Jefferson, the detective, shouted over the noise. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Corinne Jefferson. You are under arrest for elder abuse resulting in great bodily harm. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit homicide." 2 large officers grabbed Meredith. One of them twisted her arm behind her back with force. Meredith screamed a high, piercing sound that tore through the tent. "Get off me!" she shrieked, kicking and thrashing. "I am innocent!" It was Terrence. "He made me do it." She turned on her husband instantly. The mask of the loving wife dissolved, revealing the rat underneath. He knew, she screamed, pointing her chin at Terrence while the officers handcuffed her. He knew everything. He told me to do it. He said he wanted the inheritance. Arrest him, too. He is the one who wanted her dead. Terrence stayed on his knees. He did not defend himself. He just watched her. He watched the woman he had chosen over his own blood try to frame him for a murder she committed. The detective looked at Terrence. "Get him up," she ordered. An officer hauled Terrence to his feet. He was limp like a rag doll. He did not resist as the cuffs were slapped onto his wrists. He was broken. The shame was radiating off him in waves. He was the man who had let his wife kill his mother for a loan that did not even exist. He was the man who had called his father crazy to protect a murderer. Meredith was still screaming as they dragged her toward the exit. Her red dress was torn. Her hair was wild. She looked deranged. "You are useless, Terrence," she howled. "You never had the guts to do what needed to be done. I did everything for you. I built this company. I made you a man, and you let them take me. I hate you. I hate you." Her voice faded as they shoved her into the back of a waiting squad car. The sirens wailed a long, mournful sound that signaled the end of the Jefferson dynasty. But the justice was not finished yet. As the officers were clearing the stage, another police cruiser pulled up to the edge of the tent. The back door opened. A young man was pulled out. He was wearing handcuffs. He looked terrified. He looked like a child who had been caught playing with fire. It was Kendrick, my youngest son. He saw me on the stage. He started to cry. "Dad," he yelled. "Dad, help me. They say I am being charged with manslaughter. They say you gave them the file. Dad, tell them it is a mistake." I looked at him. I remembered the night in the kitchen. I remembered the wire taped to his chest. I remembered him trying to trap me. The detective walked over to me. "Mr. Jefferson," she said. "We picked him up at his apartment. He was trying to pack a bag. We have the file you sent to Miss Caldwell. The ballistics match the headlight fragment found in the victim body. He is going away for a long time." I looked at Kendrick. He was struggling against the officers, begging, pleading, calling my name. "Dad, please," he screamed. "I am your son." And then I looked at Terrence standing a few feet away, staring at the ground, the weight of his sins crushing him into the dust. They were both looking at me. They were looking for the father who used to fix their bikes. They were looking for the father who used to pay their debts. They were looking for the man they had spent the last month trying to destroy. I stepped to the edge of the stage. The crowd parted, making a path for me. I looked at Terrence. I looked at Kendrick. I did not feel anger anymore. I did not feel hate. I felt a profound, cold emptiness. "You are not my sons," I said quietly. "My sons were men of honor. My sons would never hurt a woman. My sons would never steal. My sons died a long time ago." I turned my back on them. "Dad," Terrence whispered. It was a soft, desperate sound. "Where are you going?" I did not answer. I walked down the stairs. Javier was waiting for me at the bottom. The 12 veterans formed a line parting the sea of reporters and onlookers. "Mr. Jefferson," Javier said, "the car is ready." I walked through the crowd. I heard the camera shutters clicking. I heard the reporters shouting questions. "Mr. Jefferson, how do you feel? Mr. Jefferson, what will happen to the company?" I did not stop. I did not look back. Behind me, I heard the car doors slam shut. I heard the engines start. I knew my children were in the back of those cars being taken to a place where money could not save them. I walked out of the tent and into the sunlight. The air was fresh. The city skyline stood tall in the distance. I reached into my pocket and touched the old brass key to my front door. The locks had been changed by Meredith, but Javier had changed them back this morning. I was going home. I was going home to an empty house. I was going home to silence. But it would be a clean silence. It would be a silence bought with truth. I got into Javier's truck. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. "It is done, sir," he said. "Yes," I said, closing my eyes. "It is done. Drive Javier. Take me to Corinne. I have to tell her she can rest now. 6 months is a long time. It is long enough for the seasons to change from the biting cold of winter to the warm promise of summer. It is long enough for a building to be torn down and a new foundation to be poured. And it is long enough for the mighty to fall from their thrones and hit the bottom of the pit they dug for themselves." I went to visit Meredith yesterday. I did not go because I missed her. I went because I needed to see if the fire in her eyes had finally gone out. She is currently residing at the State Correctional Facility for Women. It is a gray concrete box surrounded by razor wire. It is very different from the glass corner office she coveted. She was working in the laundry detail. I stood on the other side of the glass partition. When they brought her in, she looked smaller. The expensive hair treatments were gone, replaced by gray roots and harsh soap. The red dress was gone, replaced by a faded orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. She sat down and picked up the phone. She did not scream. She did not threaten. She just looked at me with dead eyes. She told me she hates the noise. She said the prison is never quiet. It is filled with the sounds of weeping and metal doors slamming. I listened to her complain about the food and the rough sheets. She asked me for money for the commissary. She asked me to hire a better appeals lawyer. She still did not understand. She still thought this was a negotiation. I told her simply that the accounts were closed. I told her that the only currency she had left was time, 10 to 15 years of it. When I hung up the phone, she started to cry, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. She was not sorry for what she did to Corinne. She was only sorry she got caught. Terrence did not fare much better. He avoided prison by turning state witness against his wife and pleading guilty to lesser charges of fraud. But the judge was not lenient. He was stripped of his CPA license. He was barred from ever holding a corporate officer position again. And he was ordered to pay restitution that will take him the rest of his life to clear. I drove past the discount auto parts store on 4th Street last week. I saw him through the window. My son, the former CEO, was wearing a green vest stocking shelves with motor oil. He looked old. He looked tired. He saw my truck drive by. He paused, holding a bottle of oil in his hand. He looked at me, and for a second I thought he might wave. But he didn't. He looked down and went back to work. He is living in a small studio apartment above a laundromat. He has no wife. He has no fortune. He has only the silence of his empty life and the memory of the mother he betrayed. And Kendrick, my baby boy, the one who tried to sell his father for a gambling debt. He is in the medium security unit upstate. Manslaughter. The district attorney did not blink. The evidence regarding the hit and run was irrefutable. Kendrick writes me letters. He sends them every week. In the beginning, they were angry letters blaming me for ruining his life. But lately, the tone has changed. He writes about the nightmares. He writes about the face of the girl he hit. He is finally starting to feel the weight of a human life. I do not visit him. Not yet. Some sins require a long time in the wilderness before forgiveness can even be discussed. I read his letters and I file them away in a box. Maybe one day when he has served his time and found his soul, I will open the box. But not today. Karma is not a vengeful spirit. It is simply a mirror. It reflects exactly what you put in front of it. My children planted seeds of greed and deceit, and now they are harvesting a crop of ashes. It is a tragedy, but it is a tragedy they wrote themselves. I pulled my truck into the parking lot of the old warehouse. The sun was high in the sky, and the air smelled of sawdust and fresh paint. The sign out front no longer said Jefferson Corporation. It was a new sign, hand-painted in bright blue and gold. The Corinne Jefferson Trade School. I turned off the engine. The sound of the truck dying was replaced by the beautiful noise of construction. I heard hammers banging, I heard power saws whining, I heard voices shouting instructions and laughing. I stepped out of the truck. My hips still ached when it rained, but today in the warmth of the sun I felt strong. I walked into the main bay. The place where I had once hidden from security guards was now filled with workbenches. 20 young men and women were standing around a framing station. They were wearing hard hats and tool belts. They looked like me 40 years ago, hungry, eager, looking for a chance. Standing at the front of the room wearing a suit jacket over his work shirt was Javier. He was the director of operations now. He looked the part. He commanded respect not through fear but through competence. "All right, listen up," Javier shouted over the noise. "You can have the best blueprints in the world, but if your measurements are off by 1/8 of an inch, the whole house leans. Precision is not optional. It is the difference between a shack and a home." He saw me walking in. His face broke into a wide grin. "Mr. Jefferson," he called out. "Class attention." The students stopped working. They turned to face me. "This is the man who built the skyline you see out the window," Javier said. "Listen to him." I walked to the center of the room. I ran my hand over a piece of lumber. It was smooth and straight. "Good morning," I said. "Good morning, Mr. Jefferson," they chorused. I looked at their faces. They were black, Latino, white. They were kids from the neighborhood, kids who had been told they were nothing, kids who had been ignored by the system Meredith represented. I held up a hammer. This tool does not care who your father is, I said. It does not care how much money you have in the bank. It only cares about one thing. Can you drive the nails straight? I looked around the room. My wife Corinne believed that a building was more than just walls and a roof. She believed it was a promise of safety, a promise of future. You are here to learn how to keep that promise. You are not just building houses, you are building your own lives. Do not cut corners. Do not hide mistakes behind drywall, because eventually the truth always comes out. Build it right and it will stand forever. I spent the next 2 hours showing a young man named Marcus how to properly miter a corner joint. He was clumsy at first, but he kept trying. I saw the frustration in his eyes, and then I saw the spark of understanding. When the two pieces of wood fit together perfectly, he looked at me with a pride that money cannot buy. That is the legacy, I said, patting him on the shoulder. That right there. I walked out of the warehouse in the late afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. Javier walked me to my truck. We have a waiting list of 50 students for next semester, Javier said. The community support is incredible, and the trust fund is performing well. We can expand to plumbing and electrical next year. You are doing a good job, Javier, I said. Corinne would be proud. We are doing a good job, Walter, he corrected me. I looked at him. He was the son I should have had. He was the family I chose. I climbed into my truck. It was the same 1968 Chevy C10 I had sold to Red. I bought it back the day after the arrest. I paid double what Red gave me, but it was worth every penny. It was my history. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, throaty rumble that sounded like freedom. I have one more stop, I said. I drove through the city. I drove past the skyscrapers I had built. I drove past the courthouse where I had been humiliated. None of it mattered anymore. I pulled up to a small house in the suburbs. It was where Kendrick's ex-girlfriend lived, the mother of his son. A little boy ran out the front door. He was 7 years old with big eyes and a smile that missing a front tooth. Little Jamal, my grandson. The only innocent thing to come out of this whole mess. Grandpa, he yelled, running toward the truck. I opened the door and lifted him onto the bench seat. He smelled of grass and bubble gum. Are we going for ice cream? He asked, buckling his seatbelt. We sure are, I said. And then we are going to the park. I want to show you how to fly a kite. We drove west toward the setting sun. The sky was painting itself in shades of purple and orange. It was beautiful. I looked at Jamal. He was looking out the window, pointing at a dog on the sidewalk, laughing. He did not know about the fraud. He did not know about the prison sentences. He just knew that his grandpa was here. I thought about that phone call from Javier 6 months ago, the call that started it all. Don't come alone. Bring your sons. I gripped the steering wheel. The leather felt warm under my hands. Javier was right, but he was also wrong. I brought my sons to that office not to share in the wealth, but to witness their own destruction. They walked into that room and they dug their own graves with their greed. They came alone because they had no loyalty, no honor, no love. But me. I looked at the empty road ahead. I am not alone. I have the truth. I have the memory of a woman who loved me enough to save me from beyond the grave. I have a school full of children building a future. And I have this little boy sitting next to me. The rearview mirror reflected the road behind us. It was a long, dark road full of potholes and wreckage. But I was not looking in the mirror anymore. I shifted gears. The truck surged forward. I am Walter Jefferson. I am a builder. And for the first time in a long time, I am building something that will last. The sun dipped below the horizon, but I was not afraid of the dark. The headlights cut through the twilight, steady and bright. We drove on into the peace of the evening, leaving the ghosts behind us in the dust. I spent 40 years building skyscrapers of steel and glass, but I failed to build the most important foundation of all. I failed to build men of character. This journey taught me that family is not defined by whose blood runs in your veins, but by whose hand holds yours when the storm comes. I learned that sometimes you have to let the people you love fall so they can learn to stand or stay down in the mud they chose. Corinne taught me that true love is not just about comfort, it is about protection even from beyond the grave. True legacy is not the money you leave behind in a bank account. It is the integrity you carry within your soul and the lives you lift up along the way. If you believe that justice was served today, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments below, would you have given your sons one last chance like I did, or would you have walked away sooner? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.